Hello everyone, welcome back into another stream of Last Protagonist reacting to a bunch of videos. I hope you're doing well. So on yesterday's stream, we checked out how a tragedy believed Mesmer caused the shattering, then Fat Brett's the horrific truth behind America's godhood, then Zominical's how From Software fans lost the plot. So for today, I have queued up first Dekuzek's Melina, the failed successor, Elden Ring lore theory, and what is the Secrets of the Kindling Maiden is what the thumbnail says. Then next I have Paspaya's Making Mohg Matter, Mohg's lore post Elden Ring DLC, and the thumbnail says Mohg uncancelled. He beat the allegations. Then a video that I've had in my queue for a really long time and am excited to check out will be Curious Archives, the most powerful type of world building, Moldy world building. Then, depending on how much time after that, we have the Erdtree is a Stamen by a Tragedy, which I think we'll be able to get to this one. So, anyway, welcome back in, everybody. We have Astynex, Elden Enthusiast, Weddy, back here early. How's it going, guys? So, without further ado, let's go ahead and check out Dekuzek's Melina, the failed successor. Boy, hey.
From the beginning, Melina has been a mystery. We had so many questions about her and her place in the world of Elden Ring. With questions like, who is Melina? Where did she come from? Why is she helping us? And how did she get her hands on Torrent? Of course, we also don't know the existence of the Glowmite Queen, and we weren't sure whether she was a daughter of Marika or not. We now have answers to some of these questions, and in this video I will attempt to piece together Melina's existence, purpose, and past. To get started, we did get confirmation that Melina is in fact Marika's daughter, and the younger sister to Mesmer.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with his conclusion. I wouldn't necessarily say it's outright confirmation. We've already got so many people theorizing about the lore of Mesmer's parentage that I don't think it's truly set in stone despite everything, even though I think, at least from Mesmer's words to America, that it should be very clear, in my opinion, that he is a child of Marika, in which case, if he is, then it seems like his younger sister should also be a daughter of Marika, but there's always the possibility that they could have different parents and she could still be his younger sister, either like if Radagon's her father or something else. But I believe, obviously, with Melina saying that she was given her purpose by her mother at the foot of the Erdtree, that it is most likely Marika. So for me, there really isn't much of a shadow beyond the Erdtree of a doubt that Melina and Mesmer both came from Marika, but I do recognize that others feel differently, even if I disagree with them. And then what he says, you mean, it does say he's a demigod slain. That's true. And it's kind of funny because, what's his name? Godefroy does not have demigod slain when you defeat him. Hey, Astynex, you got a puppy girl and a handsome old cat. Is this a new puppy girl, or are you just talking about your... Wait, what are you doing? Sorry about that. Puppy is throwing a fit, can't get comfortable or something. So yeah, anyway, is your beautiful puppy girl an actual new puppy or just what you call your dog? Because like I just did right now, my dog's like 3 or 4 years old now. I still call him puppy all the time. All right, here we go.
And the younger sister to Mesmer. We don't know the exact order of Marika's children, but it seems as though Mesmer may have been Marika's firstborn. It seems as though Marika and Radagon first procreated to create Mesmer and potentially Melina, We see spears impaling the giants that are reminiscent of Messmer's spears. Messmer is also clearly born of Marika and Radagon, with the matching M naming convention, his own butterfly, and of course his red hair.
It's super just desaturated. I wonder if he got HDR'd or something here. Anyway, Big Man Moon, welcome on in. And Asterix, you have a true pup. I'm a little bit jealous, but not really, because it's real pain in the butt breaking in an actual puppy.
Meaning that he would need to have been born either before or after Marika and Godfrey were married. Although we do need to consider that Messmer would have needed to have been born early enough to enact Marika's crusade on the Hornsent. In regards to the timeline, it seems that the crusade took place during the union of Radagon and Rennala, specifically because of R'hllana's connection with Messmer, and the fact that Rennala approved of her departure. We know that Rennala was mentally broken when Radagon left, so I don't believe she would have been capable of approving, and I don't think...
Yeah, and that's a pretty good clue as to Rennala's state of mind and when that should take place on the timeline. I tend to think that the Crusade might have been like the tipping point that led into Radagon becoming the Elden Lord, but certainly I agree with... Who is this again? Dekazek's timeline breakdown so far.
I think she would have approved, even if...
Except for like the children thing. I think it's just a little bit too up in the air, but I really don't have any like qualms with what he said, because it's pretty clear he's saying that this is more speculation than anything so concrete.
If she could. This means that the Crusade needed to have begun during the Radagon-Rennala union. If we take that into context, I don't believe that Messmer would have been prepared to crusade the Hornsent if he had just been born before the Liurnian Wars. When paired with the spears and the giants, I believe this hints to Messmer being the firstborn, before Marika and Godfrey conquered the giants. As far as we know, there are only 2 times Marika and Radagon created...
Hold on, how do you say that again? Let me...
Before the Liurnian Wars. When paired with the spears and the giants, I believe this hints to Messmer being the firstborn, before Marika and Godfrey conquered the giants.
So he does literally mean like the firstborn child. Okay.
As far as we know, there are only 2 times Marika and Radagon created demigod children, Messmer, and of course Miquella and Melina. This begs the question, who is the father of Melina? I think this is also simple. Melina has pinkish red hair, which could be red that is faded by having been burned before, or is a result of her spirit form. But what we do know is that she also carries the M naming convention and has her own smoldering butterfly, which to me confirms that she is a child of Marika and Radagon. Further, I believe that Melina is the second-born to Marika and Radagon, that she came after Radagon had become Elden Lord. All of the children of Marika...
I don't think that timeline works because, as I was saying on the stream the past couple days, we know that Ranni seems to have had a personal connection with Melina, and the fact that she was entrusted with the Spirit Calling Bell and the 3 Wolf Spirit Ashes, that may suggest that she would have known Melina before she became bodiless, and... What else did I link into that, which gave a little bit of a hint that it would have been before the shattering and whatnot? There was something, but I'm drawing a blank right now. Anyway, so I tend to think Melina has to have been around before Radagon became the true Elden Lord, because she's burned and bodiless, and we don't know when she was made bodiless. So, yeah. What about the Omen twins? That one's up for debate as well. We don't know if they're the firstborn or later or anything like that. It's very strange because Morgott seems like he has the de facto oldest child role by being the Lord of Leyndell. So I wonder if Messmer could have accomplished that role if he was still around, but if he's a Radagon child, probably not, because he's not of the golden lineage, perhaps. Although I'm still willing to hear arguments that Messmer may not be Radagons despite everything.
And Radagon are cursed, and Melina is no different. Messmer is cursed by the Abyssal Serpent, Miquella is cursed with eternal youth or nascency, and Melina is cursed by the scarlet rot. Melina is, as expected, cursed by what seems like death. There seems to be some form of parity between the siblings. With Melina and Miquella, we see opposing sides of rot and decay versus Miquella's stagnant youth. Mesmer and Melina seem to have multiple connections as well. Of course, the most obvious being their visions of fire, where they seem to have opposing opinions. We know from the description of Mesmer's orb that he wished to rid himself of his fire, where Melina seems to embrace her connection to fire. Mesmer also goes on to rule the spirit realm, prolonging and reinforcing a world without death, where Melina tells us about the world she wants in her dialogue before burning the Erdtree. She tells us that she watched the world, and that it needs death indiscriminate, which is kind of the polar opposite of the take that Mesmer has, where he burns the Hornsent in his flame for eternity. That brings us to the topic of Melina's sealed eye. We learn that Marika had removed and replaced Mesmer's eye with the Seal of Grace. Eyes in Elden Ring seem to be a great form of power. Marika replaced Mesmer's eye with the Seal of Grace to subdue the power of the Abyssal Serpent, and we gain power from equipping Radagon or Marika's eyes as talismans, and of course the Tarnished and Godfrey had the grace removed from their eyes. Knowing the power that this has, it seems likely that Marika would have performed the same action with Melina, removing her right eye and replacing it with the Seal of Grace, and sealing her left eye, which we see opened in the Frenzied Flame ending, along with a very faded right eye, seemingly
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that, just because what is going on with her eyes does seem to be visually distinct with the Sword Seals and the Scar Seals. Now, I do think it's very interesting that her right eye does become clouded and dulled of its gold color. And of course, everybody always pays attention to the gloam eye that she has there. But anyway, Galaxy Dragon, welcome back in. You think they're both Radagons, but it's still early and they were passed off as Godfreys. Possibly. It is also interesting how Mesmer took people from Lane Dell with him, and yeah, I don't know. The whole Lane Dell timeline is strange to me as well.
Because we destroyed the Source of Grace, meaning that Melina's seal has been broken. To learn more about Melina, we need to take a step back and look over the timeline that led to her birth and the paths that she walks. Upon becoming a god, Marika removes the Rune of Death from her Golden Order and begins her conquest over the lands between. Eventually, with the defeat of the giants and the confining of the Flame of Ruin, Marika declares the beginning of the Age of the Erdtree.
So I definitely appreciate him giving out his timeline of events here, because that'll make it easier for me to know how consistent his thoughts will be, and also to bring up things that may or may not align with those ideas.
And subsequently, the Age of Plenty, where the Erdtree sap was plentiful, creating new life and blessing those of the lands between. The Erdtree relies on death to live, and to birth new life. And as Marika's conquest continued, and the Erdtree birthed new life without receiving death, the sap of the Erdtree quickly dries up, and the Age of Plenty comes to an end. New life is no longer being created, and the dragons lead an assault on Landel, further expanding the death in the lands between. With no new life replacing the dead, Marika goes searching for answers in her Golden Order.
I declare mine intent, to search the depths of the Golden Order, through understanding of the proper way. Our faith, our grace is increased. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past. My comrades, why must ye falter?
As a multifaceted plan, Marika marches on Liurnia as Radagon, to both protect her order from the potential threat of Raya Lucaria and the power of the Carians, as well as to learn more about her order. Marika, much like the population of the lands between, were aware of the Carian Preceptor's ability to read the fates in the stars. So while Marika waged war with Liurnia for her own protection, it seems she also had alternative motives to gain insight into her fate and the fate of her order after her conquest was complete. Unfortunately for Marika, the Carians were by far the most difficult foe she had encountered, despite their
So he did say something about Melina being related to death earlier, and that might play into how we should look at the timeline in his ordering of events and things like that later. But I wanted to bring that up before I forgot completely. So if death does have some direct connection to Melina, then I would argue she should have been born before Radagon becomes Elden Lord, unless he has some explanation as to why she would have that connection despite the whole Rune of Death being sealed away. What he said, you don't think you can call a protection when you're the aggressor? It's a preemptive strike. It's different. Territorial aggressions, territorial defenses, same difference. Big Moon, you don't think the story for Elden Ring is the best, and they should have had a more linked story than such loose storytelling? So, yeah, I don't know. Like, it seems at certain points they did have a stronger vision for things, but I'm really curious about how much was actually concrete because of how much changed between 1.0 and the final version of the DLC with Mikola's storyline. So I'm very confused. I'm really curious as to whether or not George had any timeline considerations as far as the creation of the Golden Order and the removal of the Rune of Death and like the Glowmite Queen type stuff. I would be really, really curious to know more about that. Even if I turn out to be wrong about everything, it would just be kind of cool to know how much he really did influence the game. Hey, Mendacious Cat. She's the shadow of the Glowmite Queen? Maybe. Or maybe the Glowmite Queen is the shadow of her. What he says, if someone's related to death, you believe the guy that gets killed is the one you should think of? Could you elaborate on that? Because it sounds like you're talking about Godwyn, but the syntax is a little bit weird in that sentence.
Low numbers, they match the champions of gold in battle, leading to a change in her plans. Instead of conquest, she renounces aggression in the form of Radagon and marries Renala, linking the Erdtree and the Carian royalty together. The lessons differed, but the outcome remained the same.
All right, so you did say Godwyn? Yeah, so with Godwyn being called the Prince of Death, shouldn't that bring the question of who his mother is and whether his mother would therefore be the Queen of Death? Also, everyone is the Golem Queen? Exactly.
Marika gained access to her own personal preceptors, requiring them to seal the mouth of their masks, to signify their duty to keep the matters discussed between them and Radagon completely secret. Sworn to their duty of hiding the secrets of Radagon and Marika, Marika is able to further inquire about her fate. This discovery marks a major shift in Marika's demeanor, her plans, and her actions. This is the moment when she turns her back on the greater will. Marika, with the help of the preceptors, discovers that she is destined to be entirely taken over by Radagon, while she remains the vessel for the Elden Ring and the Elden Beast.
I would certainly like a source about that.
This is seen in Radagon's existence while Marika is a lifeless husk. Marika shown to be aware of this fate, as we hear her say,
in Marika's own words, O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me. Thou art yet to become a god. Let us be shattered, both, mine other self.
At least he kept the final line in there. So we talked about this on stream yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, but there are some discrepancies between the English and Japanese. Now, with the localization, I don't think it's a bad job whatsoever, but it may imply a little bit more within the English text than what may have been meant in the Japanese script. So one of the issues is the Japanese word that was translated as yet here can mean yet, but it can also mean still or not yet. So I'll just pull this back up again. So Mada can mean still, as yet only, or not yet. So when Marika is saying that Radagon is still not yet her, he is not yet a god still, there is a bit of a discrepancy in that in the Japanese, she doesn't say you have still not become me. Like, that aspect of becoming is not in the Japanese text, which is very, very leading in the English, because it makes it sound as though Radagon therefore would have the potential to get to that point. But it's got to load. Not yet. I always forget how she phrases that. Yet a god. A god. So let's go backwards. Oh, shattered both. That's the easiest way. Let us be the shattered both mine other self. Okay. Thou art yet to become me. Thou art yet to become a god. Okay. So this... Oh, I should probably make it bigger for you guys. This line here, the word become doesn't exist in the Japanese text here, but you can kind of read it between the lines. She says that you are still not me, still not a god. So we technically don't know from the Japanese text whether Radagon even has the potential to become a god. And of course, some of that might be arguable, especially with how you can argue that he may be the not Finger Slayer Blade, what's it called? The Sacred Relic Sword. So that's just kind of one big discrepancy, which can mislead people there. And then Captini, welcome back into the stream. You think we'll get a smoking stream before we know who the Glow-Eyed Queen is? So you'll get neither ever, so we'll never learn. And then Mao, welcome back in.
Prior to the Liurnian Wars, Marika seemed to consistently be expanding her reach and emphasizing herself as Queen Marika the Eternal. Midway through the Radagon-Renala Union, we start to see Marika planning for a successor. After years of ruling, she begins her crusade on the Hornsent, sending Mesmer to the Shadow Realm and sealing him away. Furthermore, we start to see the arrival of the first Empyreans. Prior to Marika's discovery, her children were never labeled as Empyreans. It wasn't until Ranni, Miquella, and Melina that Empyreans are named. Even Godwyn and Radon, who were seen as honorable and strong, are not considered Empyreans. Ranni being the...
And in a way, he's not wrong, but it is kind of overlooking how Marika and the Glow-Eyed Queen are referred to, or rumored to be Empyreans and whatnot. Exactly, Mendacious Cat.
The youngest, but the first Empyrean shows that Marika learns of this fate following Radon and Rykard, but before Ranni. During this time, Godfrey and the Tarnished are sent away, with plans to return and become Elden Lord should all else fail. Radagon and Marika return to Landel, where Marika starts planning steps for her successor, creating Melina, the first Empyrean born of a single god. Upon sealing away Mesmer and the Shadow Realm, Marika creates a space separated from the Lands Between. At one point, the Lands Between and the Shadow Realm were one and the same, with the Shadow Realm sealed in the center of the Lands Between. Similarly to Fair Missoula, the Shadow Realm seems to be locked in a constant state, Fair Missoula being perpetually crumbling following the meteor strike that shattered it originally. The Shadow Realm seems to be locked in the same state that it was when it was sealed away by Marika. With this in mind, it tells us that the Erdtree is the Erdtree in its original form. The Erdtree Avatar Remembrance describes it as the shadow of the Erdtree, born of dark notions that bear no sense of order. In other words, the Erdtree is the shadow of the Erdtree's former self, sealed away by Marika along with Mesmer. So if that's true, I think that presents some issues in Dekazak's interpretation of like the incarnation of Marika's Golden Order, because then if the Erdtree was the Erdtree, then why did it bear no resemblance of order? So that's one of many reasons why I tend to believe the Golden Order would have come later in the timeline. But that's honestly like not the biggest deal in terms of
the current subject matter at hand.
The Erdtree faithful that were sealed away with Mesmer never come to learn of the golden tree that comes to light the lands between. Instead, they continue to worship the Erdtree in the only form that they know, through the collection of Shadow Tree fragments. The Shadow Realm never does come to learn about what happens in the future outside the Shadow Realm, never knowing the Glowmide Queen, the Godskins, the Golden Order fundamentalism, or why their land is now infected with death blight.
So if he said that the Rune of Death was removed before America became a god, before the war against the Giants, the Glowmide Queen would have happened before all of this stuff with the Crusade, so he might be right, but the way that he's making it sound right here is that the Glowmide Queen would have happened after all that, which should not be the case.
Melina, the first Empyrean born of a single god, lives through her childhood, seeing the destruction and failure of the current order without death. Guided by America as her chosen successor, she learns how the world works and how she will become the next ruler. Before sending Melina to discover her own path, America even teaches Melina her secret minor Erdtree incantation, reinforcing the kindness America used to have and the kindness Melina needs to return to the world. Melina's path leads to her vision of the world in which she would have, one that exists with death indiscriminate. Melina finds power in the Rune of Death, plucked from the Golden Order but left unsealed, becoming the Glowmide Queen. Her vision of black flame leading to the creation of the Godskins and the beginning of Melina's plan to enact the Godskin Hunt, delivering death indiscriminate and remaking the Golden Order with death included in the world once again. As her God Hunt began, Marika sent Malekith to defeat the Glowmide Queen and fully seal death away. Eventually, Malekith proves successful, and Marika looks for ways to heal the world and her people. Marika takes drastic measures to seal and hide the Rune of Death, locking Melina away in a room just outside the Forbidden Lands, and giving a new purpose to Melina to become the Kindling Maiden. Igniting the flame of ruin grants one access to Farum Azula. Thus, Melina's new purpose as Kindling Maiden is to ignite the flame of ruin, burn the existing Erdtree so Malekith can take the Rune of Death and hide away in Farum Azula. Following that, Marika replaces the Erdtree with a golden version of itself, created from an incantation to heal her severely broken people. While guiding the Tarnished, Enya says,
"You must find kindling. Only the smouldering flame in the great forge of the giants on the highest peak in the lands between can burn the Erdtree. But special kindling is required to reignite the flame. For the flame to burn the Erdtree, a sacrifice is needed of one who envisions the flame and can..."
For the flame to burn the Erdtree, a sacrifice is needed. It'd be nice to point to the Divine Gate and use that as a justification, but it still wouldn't explain why Melina was burned once before. So, the more that I think about it, the more I am warming up, I suppose, pun intended, to the idea that Melina was burned in the past to transition from the Shadow Tree times into the current Erdtree times. Well, the current Erdtree times before it was shattered, at least. So, I don't know. Hey, Mappy, welcome into the stream. Mendacious says, maybe tarnishing was used as a punishment in select cases, though Godfrey is known as the first tarnished. Is he technically known as the first tarnished? Like, I think that's the easiest intended takeaway. But it also seems like, it's not too important. Anyway, rather than tarnishing, we do know with like the lens or the eye of occultation, whatever it's called in the DLC. Let me pull it up. Iris of occultation. That In the realm of shadow, it was used to intensify the fears of their flock to magnificent effect. Because it denies light in all its forms. Galaxy Dragon says, if you remember, it's implied Nicholas spoke with Mesmer. He could have caught him up on current events. Yes, that is another common thought as well. I think that's the easiest way to rectify some of the oddities about Mesmer, recognizing that the player character is tarnished and thus without light or grace and stuff like that. But it's a little bit unsatisfying, but at least it is an explanation. So whether you think Mesmer knows the plan because he knows the purpose of the Tarnished? If so, it sucks that he never shared that plan with us, or that anybody didn't bother to share it with us. It sucks.
Of one who envisions the flame and can lead you to the rune of death.
Melina is keenly aware of the location of the rune of death when she says, "Those who walk alongside flame shall soon meet the road of destined death." Melina also already knows how to burn the Erdtree, seeing as she's done so before. We can see the scattered ashes of this event remaining throughout Leyndell, and the old wooden tree roots of the Erdtree's former self still tangling their way through deep-root depths. And Melina has been burned away along with it. Following the shattering of the Elden Ring and the return of the Tarnished,
Oh, so Matt, you're asking whether or not Mesmer is like quoting a scripture and if he's referring to himself in the third person that way. So let's pull that up. Stripped of the grace. So this, how do you begin to describe this? So Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of lights? So he's like, Mom, would you truly permit lordship in one without light such as this? However, my duty is unchanging. There shall be death to all those without the blessing of gold in the fire of Mesmer. So, as far as him referring to himself in the third person, that isn't like too uncommon for like villainous type speech. Like this could almost be interpreted as like a not just an aspect of himself, but almost like his killing move. I don't know. It doesn't come off as like super out of place or anything, if that's what you're asking. So just to refer to somebody's self in the third person like that isn't out of line, considering he's supposed to kind of be a big bad type character. His duty is to kill the Tarnished? No, not necessarily the Tarnished. He says those without gold. So that's a bit of a difference between the English and the Japanese here, because he says those stripped of the grace of gold in English, whereas he just says those. So all that are without grace of gold, which if you want to consider the horn tent, we don't know if they were ever given the grace of gold. So if they had never had gold, he can still indiscriminately kill them with his flame of Mesmer, because he's just going for those without the grace of gold. Whereas those stripped of gold mean they had to have had it at one point and were thus effectively tarnished. So that's a good question to ask. I think I have a short that I talked about this, but yeah, it's a pretty insightful difference, like looking at Mesmer's purpose here. So yeah, I definitely understand why you guys were confused by that. And Forgeborge, nice to see again. Despite the interpretation issues, those stripped of the grace of gold sounds infinitely more poetic. Yeah, and it's really easy for me to like forget stuff like this, and it just takes certain information like that for granted. So if you guys ever do have questions about stuff like that, feel free to bring them up. All right, so where were we in the video? I'm going to back it up a little bit.
Old wooden tree roots of the Erdtree, seeing as she's done so before.
I'm going to back it up further.
Alongside Flame, shall soon meet the road of destined death. Melina also already knows how to burn the Erdtree, seeing as she's done so before. We can see the scattered ashes of this event remaining throughout Landel, and the old wooden tree roots of the Erdtree's former self still tangling their way through deep-root depths. And Melina has been burned away along with it. Following the shattering of the Elden Ring and the return of the Tarnished, Melina is given form once again, and as she says, she is searching for her purpose.
Me? I'm searching for my purpose, given to me by my mother inside the Erdtree, long ago, for the reason that I yet live, burned and bodiless.
Upon being returned, Melina is unaware of the reasoning. The idea of Melina asking why she yet lives sparks the idea that she should be dead after being burned in the past. Yet Melina is reborn and repurposed by Marika after she had been sealed in the Erdtree. In hopes of remembering her true purpose, Melina makes an accord with the Tarnished to bring her to the foot of the Erdtree. Upon the defeat of Morgott and the realization that the Erdtree is sealed, the Tarnished returns to speak with Melina, who has now discovered her true purpose, to burn the Erdtree.
The only way to stand before the Elden Ring and become the Elden Lord is to pass the thorns. My purpose serves to aid in that very act, so I'd like you to undertake a new journey with me to the Flame of Ruin, far above the clouds, upon the snowy mountain tops of the giants. Then I can set the Erdtree aflame.
So here's some other Pepe Ofnir type thoughts for you guys in the chat, because I know how much you enjoy them and going off on these somewhat unrelated tangents. So when we think about the thorns on the Erdtree, they're the impenetrable thorns. We're told that the Skadu tree has impenetrable thorns and stuff like that. So there may be a bit of a direct link between the thorns covering the entrance to the Erdtree and the Shadow Tree itself, and therefore, if Radagon is the one controlling the thorns to prevent us from accessing the Elden Throne room thing, place, technically this is the Elden Throne, but anyway, you know what I mean, then if we need not just the Flame of Ruin to access the Erdtree proper, but also we need to unleash Destined Death to actually burn it, then if the Erdtree was burned in the past, would it have required both the Flame of the Giants as well as Destined Death, or would it just be the Flames of Destined Death that would be enough to do it? And so what I'm getting at is, if the Shadow Tree was burned before, was it burned when Destined Death was still part of the Elden Ring? And then would that imply that the removal of Destined Death had to have come later? I don't know. Maybe. Hey, Chadwick, welcome back in. One day you'll learn lore for the DLC and you're going to be mad about the Mohg part? Okay. Well, that video may be coming next, so prepare yourself. Matt thinks that Melina is pretty much the same thing as Millicent and her sisters. Yes, that was something I thought about bringing up towards the beginning of the video when he was talking about the birth order of the children, but I obviously did not. I was going to let it wait and maybe bring it back up later on if I remembered. Forgeborge says, interestingly enough, surrounding the Elden Ring and making up the inside of Radagon, as well as a spectral arm, are shadows covered by a thin layer of crumbling stone / flesh. If you want to call those shadows, that's fine. I have noticed a kind of similar effect going on in the Divine Towers, like dripping down from parts of it. I think I might have footage of that, so let's see. Divine Tower. This might be good enough. Oh, the lighting is gonna suck. Okay, so actually, like this right here next to the whatever this is called, the torch lantern thingy. So you'll have randomly these shadows coming down. So we have these wisps of smoke, but as well as these. And these very much so remind me of the stuff which is in Radagon. And one of my favorite details about the Divine Towers is that they're all lined with these kind of somewhat golden, ambery looking meteorites. And of course these ones as well. So I think that's it for the shadows. Anyway, just a neat little detail there, which may or may not be relevant. Okay, let's go back in.
And guide you down the path to becoming Elden Lord.
In the path forward, Melina begins reverting to who she once was. She says this when talking about her actions.
There is something I'd like to say. My purpose was given to me by my mother, but now I act of my own volition. I have set my heart upon the world that I would have, regardless of my mother's designs. I won't allow anyone to speak ill of that, not even you.
Melina and the Tarnished continue to the Forge of Giants, defeating the Fire Giant and finding themselves overlooking the smoldering flame of ruin.
I was hoping he would say who he thinks she's reverting to a little bit more quickly, but anyway, Impact player, welcome back into the stream. So, one of the things which fascinates me about Melina is that unlike all of the other demigod children, why is it she who seems to have this closer connection to Marika? How come she's the one who's able to interpret Marika's will and return to the Erdtree and like learn all this stuff? And then why is it that her vision coincides with that of her mother's? I think there's a very strong case to be made that she may have a stronger connection with Marika than all of the other children. Minor Erdtree stuff withstanding aside.
Later, she reveals what this world looks like.
I have long observed the lands between. This world is in dire need of repair and death. Indiscriminate. Are you prepared to commit a cardinal sin?
Upon the decision to commit a cardinal sin, Melina begins her ritual to burn the Erdtree, being well aware of how to do so from the first time she burned it. She recites these words.
O Erdtree.
That reminds me, I still need to look into the whole sin aspect of things to try to see if we can get more of a timeline consideration about things as they relate to the first cardinal sin and whatnot.
You shall burn.
Which is ironic because I've definitely looked into the sin stuff in the past, but I guess I was looking at it from a different perspective.
Burn for the sake of the new Lord. Thank you for guiding me here. The one who walks alongside flame shall one day meet the road of destined death. Goodbye.
Impact player asks, why does the Tarnish pass out during this? Because Melina touches us, or who knows. So Flowboard said, it seems to them as though Gold and Shadow are intertwined irreversibly despite Marika's best efforts. Also, compounding on the towers, the Tower of Veneer Limb and the Shadow Tree have similar shadow effects. They certainly do, yes. As Radagon shadows are more seething than falling. And of course, having to burn the sealing tree to reveal a near limb is also interesting in relation to the shadow tree as well. Then global sequence, nice to see you again.
This proclamation is one linked to the Kindling Maiden's Blade of Calling as well. The one who walks alongside flame shall one day meet the road of destined death. Melina recites this, indicating that not only is she the Kindling Maiden, but that she also knows that the rune of death lies in Farum Azula. At this point, Melina has walked the path of the Elden Lord along with the Tarnished, and has realized that she can place her trust in the Tarnished to carry the world in the right direction moving forward, knowing that she can no longer do the job herself. Melina leaves the world hoping for death to bring balance and for the world to heal, relying on the Tarnished to defeat the Elden beasts, reintroduce death to the lands between, and hopefully heal the world, bringing about a new age. Melina's story is one of vindication. As she grew up, she identified an issue with the lack of death in the world, and without hesitation, she attempts to bring a solution, trying to end the current age, only to be defeated and used to further protect a broken existence. In the end, Marika seems to have come to terms with the necessity of death, resorting to bringing Melina back, siding with her to get destined death in the hands of the Tarnished, so they can bring death to the gods. For now, some questions still remain. I've yet to understand how or why Melina has inherited Torrent. My thoughts right now are that Torrent was abandoned by Mikola, and, being spectral, found a new home with Melina. But there may be another reason.
It could be that the DLC image is just completely irrelevant to the lore. Who knows?
Also don't know exactly how Melina exists after the Frenzied Flame ending. The Surging Frenzied Flame item description says that the flame burns away spirits, so there must be something different about Melina, just not sure what that is yet. And finally, we don't really know why Melina chooses us. There seem to be countless Tarnished throughout the game, but it seems as though Melina only interacts with us. Of course, there is Torrent, who says Melina chose us from the start, but the same question still arises. Why Torrent chose us? And what he's really looking for? All these things are topics to consider, and I would love to hear your thoughts on everything. Thank you for watching today. Melina has been one of my favorite characters in Elden.
So, if Torrent can actually choose who's going to become Elden Lord, in a way you could say that Torrent is the next matchmaker for Marika, and I don't really want to bring this up because it does sound like very crackpotty, but maybe worth consideration nonetheless. So, or I said crockpotty, wow, crackpotty. And if Torrent matches us with Melina and we would go on to become Marika's consort, then if Melina's okay with that, is it because Melina knows that Torrent knows Marika's will or something better than she does? So there's a lot of really odd stuff with the way that Melina interacts with runes and the Finger Maidens and the player, and why she doesn't consider herself a Finger Maiden. And I really wish we knew more about Marika's two fingers and that entire situation. I wouldn't be surprised if Marika killed her two fingers, similar to the way that Ranni did at some point, and that's why we don't really see them. Although that still makes the whole Malekith and Geraint situation very ponderous indeed, especially if no harm should befall a shadow if two fingers are around, but if you kill him in Farum Azula and he still shows up in the Bestial Sanctum, how do you explain that? I don't know. Alright, let's finish this up.
Elden Ring, and her mystery makes her fun to speculate on. Let me know what your ideas are in the comments down below, and what topics you would like to hear about in the future. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.
So yeah, Dekuzek. Wait, I watched this? What the hell? Damn it! How 2 times this week? I'm doing not a good job at remembering what I've seen before. Uh-oh. Anyway, I did enjoy the video. I was going to like it, but I already did, which is kind of embarrassing. So, anyway, I'm going to share it with you guys. Because even though we do have some unresolved questions brought upon us by Dekazek as to, like, who Melina is reverting to, and then how that relates to the Glowmide Queen, and the birth order and stuff, I do think it was a pretty grounded video, and want to give him credit for that. So, whoopsies. Anyway, let's go ahead and check out the new video with Making Mohg Matter, Mohg's Lore post Elden Ring DLC by Paspaya. And this came out 9 months ago, so it's extremely new. I don't know why I said new earlier, but all right, here we go. See you in a bit, Chadwick. Uncancelled.
First, here's a quick disclaimer. Most Elden Ring lore YouTubers and lore videos are very calm and collected and...
Wait, have I watched this one as well? I have! Oh no, that was not anticipated. Did I watch this one too?
Now.
Oh, okay. Alright guys, so I'll need to run a bit of an audible and figure out what else we'll want to watch before that. Bros, that's 3 videos this week. Okay. Let's get rid of some things from the queue that I've already watched. That's why it's important. To keep up on top of this stuff. Definitely watch that. Oh yeah, I've not been doing a good job clearing this up. All right. So anyway, I'm going to transition, instead of going into the Mohg Uncancelled, into the most powerful type of world building by Curious Archive. It's Moldy world building, according to the thumbnail. Sorry, why do you get wrecked? We did react to it at some point, so it should be somewhere in my live section of my channel. So, whoopsies.
Rot. I was a good 20 hours into Elden Ring when I realized I needed to go bury a sandwich in the woods. For days I had tried to chart the game's festering ruins and putrid gods, hoping to understand why this rotting world captivated me like only a few ever had. It's seldom been claimed that moldiness is the key to great world building, but after analyzing tons of sci-fi and fantasy settings and...
So I wonder if by moldiness he just means the fact that you can kind of see the age in the world. So one of the reasons why Star Wars broke the mold, pun intended, in terms of science fiction settings is because it wasn't painted as this overly sterile, futuristic universe. It had an obvious sense of age to it, with C-3PO, R2-D2 being not terribly run down or anything, but once they get into Tatooine, like all of the stuff there being pretty run down and shabby, kind of like how the old family car has seen better days and stuff like that. And so it gave a sense of lived-in-ness to the world that a lot of people could just kind of relate to, I suppose.
And sacrificing some expired bread, I genuinely believe that mildew is one of the most powerful devices in fiction. Because rot is a story, and stories stay with you.
Moldy world building.
You can hear it if you listen closely. The squelch of a newborn god thing slipping from the womb of the old world, the hush of a billion dreams becoming fertilizer for the age to come. It is the sound of digestive rebirth, an
Man, I love Nausicaa.
idea central to creating a working definition of moldy world building.
Bro, Nausicaa is just so damn peak to me. I just love that type of art style, and just the world there was very enamoring for me, at least. And then Rooster Rick, welcome back in. The Grady Millennium Falcon, exactly. The fact that Han just beats the crap out of it rather than doing real repairs and stuff. Relatable, especially in the 70s. Hey, Helka, how's it going?
Using the term digestion rather than decay because, well, we've all seen decaying worlds, post-apocalyptic landscapes left barren from the fires of Armageddon, but a digestive world is actively feeding, consuming its own foundations to fuel what grows atop it. Nowhere is this concept more apparent than in the games of Elden Ring developer From Software, each title set in a realm where rot devours both nations and gods alike, and yet these lands are rank with life, the gastric humus giving rise to 1,000 new entities. As fungi must chew dead matter to bloom, moldy worlds exist in a state of constant gnawing, grinding ruins of the past upon their rotting molars to create a future. Moldy world building does not always require literal mold, however.
Number 1, the question of ruin.
Across the regions of Elden Ring, while the land of Caelid is choked with fungus, the Altus Plateau and Limgrave erode under coverings of vegetation. Yet said areas are unmistakably moldy in how they fester upon the bones of ages past, the very landscape dependent on ruins. As a consequence, the world itself feels like an archaeological dig, a geology of lore that legions of fans have loyally tried to excavate. The devotion that Elden Ring's environmental storytelling has inspired speaks to the larger power of a mildewed setting, because on a fundamental level, each ruin is a story. The most basic unit of plot is a change in circumstance, and what is overgrown wreckage but proof of a world's change? There's a reason why derelicts are so common in narrative-focused games. A simple coating of leaves can utterly transform what a building means to an audience, suggesting a vast timeline of unspoken eras. Rot is, ironically, among the most effective ways to make a setting come alive. Decomposition offers a rich and living history.
Oh man, he's cheating. He's using the Dark Souls 3 unused Gale theme. It's one of my favorites from that soundtrack, which you never get to hear in the game.
Without even a single line of exposition. In the game Skyrim, vast weathered structures and putrefying catacombs indicate an extensive backstory, regardless of whether the player is motivated to read through the in-game lore. The scars of history are similarly unmistakable in the kingdoms of George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, where one doesn't need to know that the series is set after the collapse of various empires to smell the stench of necrosis. As is the case with Skyrim, in all corners of Martin's world, monuments of civilizations past cast shadows over lesser present dwellings, the current nations but rats cannibalizing the towering corpse of their forebears. One could even call such settings post-apocalyptic, and indeed, much of moldy world building overlaps with the concept. But a planet-wide doomsday is not required for rot to take root. Time alone can swallow a civilization, erasing names and events, leaving nothing but enigmatic remnants. For beyond acting as a story, a ruin is a question. Why is the wall in Skyrim outside of Whiterun broken? Why was the ice wall in the north of Martin's Westeros truly built at all? It's not entirely clear, and though various potential explanations exist, the quiet ambiguity that an eroded world leaves you with only adds to the setting's intrigue. Indeed, the most effective rotting settings layer mystery upon mystery, piling multiple deposits of ruin atop each other. In Elden Ring, the corpse of a dragon festers upon the remains of an even older church. Elsewhere, the awe-inspiring walking mausoleums are stone Goliaths both overrun with moss and tree growth, and burdened with a second layer of crumbling tombs upon their backs. Every new stratum of wreckage adds subtle depth to a world. Part of
Hilko asks, how much work is it to collect all that footage? Honestly, it can be a lot of work, especially when you're taking the effort to have pretty consistent edits like this. But you can also have other people gather footage for you, or you can have an editor gather, take footage that you've gathered and then work it into a thing for you. But for a video like this, it can be a surprisingly long endeavor. Unless, if you're already recording when you're already going through and playing a game and stuff like that. But then, You also have to think about labeling it and knowing where and what footage is what, which is another time-consuming task. But the good news is, as long as you label things well enough once, then you only need to do that once, and so it can be more fruitful than not labeling things at all.
Why a series like The Last Airbender feels so fully realized is because its environments feature not just debris from the more recent air nomad genocide, but remnants from countless other fallen civilizations, the ruins so commonplace that many go unnamed and unremarked upon. In every region of the land, the wounds of long-forgotten eras mar the background, a through line that both underlines the show's themes of loss and rebirth, and makes the setting feel authentically grounded in a robust mythos. It's a method of world building one could compare to like those cross-sections of the earth in cartoons, you know, the ones with like the bones and stuff, or even a sandwich, where each new layer builds to the greater whole. The world building of the show Adventure Time is especially sandwich-coated, with the vestiges of multiple epochs all mushed together. When I was younger, I felt like an archaeologist while watching each episode, using background details to piece together that this cartoon about a boy and his magic dog was set not just after a nuclear apocalypse, but multiple Armageddons.
So yeah, that's kind of one of my favorite like long-time jokes in cartoons, is when you have like a bunch of random stuff in the ground for like fake archaeological sequences just to show something like deep underground, whether it's like showing off hell or something like that. Another kind of joke that I like is in Futurama, how you have like modern day year 2000 be normal, and then the year 3000 be extremely like futuristic because it's Futurama. But then if you like go back into the timeline stuff, what had happened was like the humans populated the earth. They got to a certain level of technological advancement. Then the aliens came, blasted them back to the Stone Age like multiple times up in between 2000 and 3000. So that might account for some of the goofy archaeology that you get sometimes in that cartoon. But obviously like a lot of it's just a joke.
Resulting in the ultimate hodgepodge of lore to pick through. Generally speaking, with every additional level of moldering leftovers, a setting will feel that much more storied. Simply dumping a junkyard worth of scrap upon a setting is not sufficient for effective world building, however.
2 Scrapyard Worlds. I'm a little bit surprised we haven't gotten Nier to show up. Maybe he didn't play it.
True moldy perfection requires exploration into how said relics shape the current populace. The most interesting scrap heap worlds often feature completely novel societies that have learned to make use of the discharge of the past. In settings like Fallout and Mad Max, entire cultures exist based on the repair and rediscovery of lost technology.
So how do you guys feel about Mad Max? Hey, it's Gundam. Not Gundam, but Gundam Battle Angel Alita. Okay. A very beautiful anime, kind of weird and not that great of an ending. But anyway, how do you guys feel about Mad Max, the series, essentially? I watched the first movie and I'm like, man, this kind of sucks. And then like the second movie gets a lot better and feels way more Mad Max. And I've seen some people say like, oh, the whole reason why the first movie is so different is because like that's immediately right after the apocalypse, essentially. And then things just continue to get worse. I'm like, okay, I could kind of buy it, but it's just kind of funny. Mendacious says Mad Max is like single digit years after the apocalypse. Yeah. Yes, I do mean the originals. Like, what do you mean originals? Do they remake them? Oh, or did you just mean the ones that like are not with Tom Hardy? That's probably what you mean. So anyway, yeah, I don't like the first Mad Max, but I like the others. Yeah, the ones with Mel Gibson, exactly. Anyway.
Scavenger worlds are typically set in Earth's imagined future, but occasionally fester in more fantastical settings. Elden Ring could be considered a scrapyard world with how most characters rely on salvaged materials, and the only new structures are meager hovels built atop grander ancient foundations. Perhaps the largest scrapyard ever envisioned is the Star Wars galaxy, a cosmos where seemingly every other planet is a landfill of debris from endless galactic skirmishes, with a population whose employment seems like 90% scrap rummager. But Star Wars being a moldy yard sale of a universe helps the setting feel lived in. The original trilogy in particular emphasizing that this is a world filthy with use and reuse.
Hey, don't I feel so clever for bringing that up like 2 minutes into the video?
Nearly every piece of technology feels like it has gone through multiple retrofits. As is often the case with scrap, the remnants give you a sense of eras that came long before, prior to those eras actually being put to screen, creating an impression of history even if you have no further context. But while wreckage might convey backstory to the audience, the characters who inhabit these ruined worlds frequently lack the context to understand the very relics they scavenge. This misunderstanding trope is most common in stories where there is a significant technological or cultural gap between a realm's current inhabitants and the civilizations that preceded them, resulting in mix-ups that are often played for laughs.
We're about to lose our American deities!
I will say that it is quite nice that they have pretty much everything that they're talking about sourced on the bottom left of the screen. So that way, if you're intrigued by something, you can look into it yourself.
But the profound alienation that can emerge between a society and the defaced ruins of their forerunners may also be a source of tragic false interpretations. The recent Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes films offer a surprisingly layered investigation into the dangers of a history disfigured by time. In the setting, there's the obvious dramatic irony of ape societies failing to understand that the structures which dominate the land were built by the now diminished human population, but also a subtler misconstruction of the ape's own heritage. The story sees a cult-like clan waging war under the banner of the ancient ape leader of Caesar, turning his doctrine of peaceful unity into a pretext for zealous conquest.
The masks take his name, twist his words.
The story explores how even the most well-intentioned philosophy can become putrefied through willful mistranslation, positing that it is not just buildings that rot eats away at, but beliefs.
Couldn't help but enjoy the use of the word mistranslation there.
The decomposition of
3. Death of a dream.
Rot eats away at, but beliefs. The decomposition of an idea, of a system of principles, is an abstract concept that Moldy worldbuilding has the power to make physical. In the ever-relevant setting of Elden Ring, the titular ring is a corporeal manifestation of the order of the world. Before the events of the game, that order is literally shattered by a vengeful deity, adding context to the ruined nature of the land. The fractured realms of Elden Ring are filled with deities similarly willing to deface their beliefs and their own bodies in exchange for greater power. A prideful demigod grafts on additional appendages, a divine dragon forges a sword from seemingly his own innards, a titan rips off their leg without hesitation as an offering to the divine. Nothing, it seems, is so precious that it can't be sacrificed for the chance at grasping additional strength. And as the gods rot physically and mentally, so too do the larger belief systems of the world. Most places of worship left abandoned and in disrepair, the statues of the divine slowly corroding alongside their philosophies. In this land of forsaken principles, some monuments even depict deities so forgotten in the present they're never mentioned anywhere else in the game. Did these gods too deserve to rot, or was something vital lost when their names were last spoken aloud? There is a particular
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because the Ul and Erd dynasties seem to be completely unrelated to the Rao dynasty, which we find out about in the DLC, and I don't know where to put either in relation to the timeline of each other, to be honest.
Particular melancholy to an overlooked structure that clearly held great meaning in a past age. The Lord of the Rings is filled with such megaliths, some of which are still revered, but just as many have crumbled away into total obscurity. Tolkien famously wrote his mythos as if he were translating an imperfect text, and would sometimes intentionally leave out details to suggest time had eroded the records. Lord of the Rings is deeply mournful of the idea of a history or culture becoming lost, though it's
Yeah, that's something that I definitely appreciate about Tolkien. One thing that maybe has been explored before in like books, but I haven't really seen done very well, and this is probably more of a me issue than anything else, would be the fact that you can have somebody who says they know like another language operate as a translator, but they might not be particularly fluent, or there could just still be some like language barrier stuff that needs to be overcome that could kind of misconstrue what the party needs to do, or like what information that they're gaining due to stuff like that.
Simultaneously offers hope that such losses can be recovered. The deterioration of the world in Elden Ring does not seem so fixable, however. There is something irrevocably funerary about the setting, the entire realm like a single mass grave, with the tombstones already too weathered to know to whom to offer condolences. It is a world stripped of its past, the only records existing in eulogies from unreliable narrators. Perhaps the best surviving ruins border the city of Leyndell, the walls outside the capital still standing proudly, but even these relatively intact structures appear to be in the early stages of compost. No empire is so grand that it lasts for eternity.
Also, with these ones, they're kind of gilded intentionally to show that they're related to the tree, I guess. So I think Leyndell and a lot of its structures are in a much better state of repair than many other places. But that isn't to say that they're all completely pristine either.
Themes of a kingdom succumbing to rot are unavoidable.
Like, obviously there's a bunch of ivy
Eternity.
overgrowing the edges of these.
Themes of a
like this right here.
kingdom succumbing to rot are unavoidable in any sufficiently moldy setting. All those cool-looking ruins have to come from somewhere. But what the corpse of an empire represents in narrative varies significantly. In Zelda Breath of the Wild and its sequel, the destruction of the Kingdom of Hyrule is presented as an unambiguous negative. This was a nation of gentleness and prosperity, and the ruins that remain are, well, much has already been written about how haunting they feel. Each battlefield a bad memory the land has been unable to fully forget. Scars from a similar battlefield mark a region outside Leyndell's borders, but the emotions of the scenery are less clear-cut. It is evident from the crack on the wall that here an army tried and failed to overtake the city, but what is less evident is why an army marched upon this realm, if their cause was just or unjust, and in a way it scarcely matters because though the forces were repelled, the city seems to have fallen to ruin regardless.
So about like the whole battle here, many people will just say that it had to have happened with the shattering because we see like the gigantic arrows sticking to the ground during this cutscene and whatnot. We see like the Radon ballistae type things or the Rykard type ballistae besieging the walls. But when we look at the actual battlefield itself, we have like the Storm Hawk banners, which don't particularly relate to any of these forces. And when you look at the armor in the ground within this battlefield, they're all wearing Banished Knight stuff. So I don't know if that's like oversight or if it's supposed to suggest that the Banished Knights did try to besiege Leyndell at some point, perhaps before the whole Shattering Wars happened, or your headcanon here.
If their cause was just or unjust, and in a way it scarcely matters because though the forces were repelled, the city seems to have fallen to ruin regardless. All across Elden Ring, one can find ruined battlements presented without any straightforward connotation, beyond perhaps the simplest one, that it is the birthright of any empire to die. Even Zelda acknowledges this. Old Hyrule is far from the only kingdom whose wreckage is strewn about the land, the entire realm a cemetery of cultures that must have once also been the height of civilization. Indeed, some of the oldest ruins are ironically the most technologically advanced, suggesting that no level of achievement can fully safeguard against decline, and reframing the most recent collapse as just the latest in a long and predictable cycle. Perhaps part of why Moldy World
4. Corpse of a Nation.
building is so consistently resonant is because it reminds us of the simple truth that nothing is so mighty it cannot be brought low by time. When exploring virtual ruins, it's impossible, at least for me, not to think about how the people who lived in these empires probably thought their way of life would last forever. A similar feeling creeps in whenever I pass by the giant corpses in the margins of Elden Ring, each titanic cadaver as nameless as the statues of the south, left barren and forgotten despite their obvious former might. Did these giants too believe themselves to be unconquerable before the rot set in? Impossibly vast powerhouses falling to ruin is an aspect of Moldy world building prevalent across genres. In science fiction, it most commonly appears in the form of immense superstructures, left festering after the empire that built them inevitably collapsed from their hubris. This trope is a tried and true method for sci-fi world building, adding a little moldy sauce to the lore broth, with the most famous examples likely coming from the game series Halo and Mass Effect. In both cases, humans seek to use the megastructures left behind by a collapsed forerunner species for their own devices, hoping to build their futures on the carcasses of the past in familiar, digestive fashion. As you might imagine, how good an idea this turns out to be varies greatly, with the same ego that ended the previous empire often flaring up when the new upstarts try to appropriate the ancient power. Even the mightiest foundations, these stories suggest, can prove too rotted to construct something novel upon. At what point is a skeleton too decayed, too putrid at its core to be salvaged, no matter its former grandeur? Inside Elden Ring's capital of Leyndell, the greatest structures of the entire game rise to pierce the heavens, and yet this city feels sick in a way that not even rot could reclaim. The layered architecture of the capital recalls Minas Tirith of Middle-earth, a city whose foundations similarly feel like they're rotting out from under it, with the latest generations of rulers said to care more about building up their legacy than if the city can withstand the weight. Leyndell similarly bears the burden of the unfathomably titanic Erdtree, a golden lifeform that can be seen from all corners of the land, a physical manifestation of the cosmic laws that supposedly binds the world together, and yet the roots of the Erdtree are ravenous, its tendrils choking the very heart of the city and carving out deep catacombs where corpses rot and monsters fester. It's a slight spoiler to say, although the lore of Elden Ring is frankly so impenetrable that it's hard to spoil any of it, but the tree itself might in fact be a kind of cosmic parasite, draining life from the capital and the lands beyond while off.
So I know a lot of people kind of hate the whole cosmic parasite theory. I've honestly never really had too much against it. And whether or not you believe it's a cosmic parasite or a terrestrial parasite is, a matter of personal interpretation, but at the very least, it does seem to be sucking out the life of the world to a degree, and then maybe that got stopped somehow, but yeah.
Offering nothing in return. Every city, like every land, is a hierarchy of layers, and if the bottom becomes too corroded while the top continues to grow, the entire structure will come crashing down. You can feel the rotting base of a city preparing to buckle under the mass of its topside from the very first episode of the series Arcane. An impeccable example of sociological world-building, Arcane presents a nation split between the wealthy and bloated city of Piltover and the festering damp of the impoverished Undercity. Everywhere you look, there is evidence these layers are not stable, that the entire house of cards is about to come crashing down. A metropolis built too tall atop too meager an edifice is hardly an unfamiliar idea, both in fiction and also outside of it. In Moldy world building in particular, cities made of multiple mildewing layers are a foundational trope, almost as common as white birds. Because I'm serious, there are always white birds in these settings. I know they're more generally used for scale, but it's a legit trend that if you see white birds, you're in for some premium moldiness.
That's kind of a funny aside there. Guess I never thought about the white birds, although I've also come from an area where there are seagulls, so I just kind of take it for granted, I suppose.
Anyway, birds or no birds, there is something uncomfortably familiar about decomposing cities, the municipal deterioration recalling any number of real-world spaces in decline. Because here's the thing, Planet
5. Earth has moldy world building. Oh no!
Earth's world building is, in general, extremely moldy. Think of how many actual cities are built atop more ancient foundations, or still have standing ruins you can see to this day. Earth is a setting absolutely riddled with eroding evidence of ages past. I think that's part of why moldy world building makes a setting feel more detailed and realistic, because it is realistic. We don't always think about our own planet this way, but Earth's history is filled with the kinds of epic kingdoms and empires that would not feel out of place in works of fantasy, with cultures that are unfamiliar to us that we too have tried to piece together from the imposing remains of their crumbling megastructures. Earth has even gone through its share of semi-apocalypses, the Bronze Age collapse, the Indus Valley decline. We are not on the first draft of human civilization. Technology has been lost and rediscovered as well, in much the same way that in Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, advanced metalworking has been forgotten and the only new Valyrian steel swords must be melted down from pre-existing blades. Throughout Earth's history, steel sword making techniques have been forgotten and reintuited multiple times. Earth's Greek fire is an even more remarkable piece of technology lost to time, an ancient chemical flame that could supposedly still burn even when exposed to water. Martin's world has its own equivalent in wildfire, and just like in our reality, all records of how to make the chemical mixture eventually mildewed away, which sounds too fantastical to be true, but genuinely, we're still not entirely sure how to make Greek fire after centuries of trying.
And I mean, that wouldn't be entirely too surprising if the production of it was limited either due to materials or the amount of people who actually had the knowledge to do so. And that's kind of held in common with like a bunch of older technologies that have been sort of replaced by newer technologies. And then there's also a bit of a resurgence to try to like go back to recreate some of the old stuff, because some new things just aren't quite at the same level. So, for example, I know like the art of making Chinese ink is a very kind of long, laborious process. Chinese ink for like, you know, calligraphy brushes and stuff like that. And so there are still people who make traditional ink because it's more of a like a high quality product for calligraphy specifically, as opposed to like the more modern type of like printing ink that can still do the job, but it just doesn't function quite the same way. There's definitely been many cases, if Chadwick was still in the chat, of how we've lost many arts of tying knots or like weaving things together as well. So I know the Native Americans had very specific types of weaving things together that has been lost due to time, and some of their descendants now are trying to like go back and rediscover some things like that, although due to the whole like textile industry, it isn't exactly a high demand type of product, which makes it a luxury product, which means it's not particularly sustainable, even if at the end of the day it can produce a higher quality than a factory mass produced thing that is designed to maximize on profit and cutting costs. You think the Elden Ring lore community is bad? The Earth lore community? Oh, your God. Misleading item descriptions? Way too much flavor text? Meow, you make some of your own inks? Is that true? Or are you just memeing again? Because that's how you be.
Earth itself really is the preeminent example of moldy world building, an endless cycle of rot and rebirth. So in a way, it should be no wonder why barnacles and rust, grime and weathering are shortcuts to a believable setting, why the easiest way to make a fictional map look more genuine is to add a tasteful bit of wrinkling. Imperfections are the key to physicality.
And coffee stains.
That's why you see people, and I'm including myself in this, use so much film grain and glitch effects in their videos, trying to emulate the authentic flaws of physical media formats. I think
that was kind of an interesting experience for me, trying to make a Twilight Zone-esque effect for a game like Elden Ring. I don't think I did like the best job by any means, but it was kind of a learning process, and I enjoyed that on my Mikola being the worst Empyrean video, essentially.
I think there's at least a broad connection between Moldy world building and physical media, not just in how material storage models can mildew, but if you think of the real maps at the start of fantasy novels or material guidebooks that used to come with games, giving your audience something corporeal and capable of weathering is like putting a fragment of your setting in their hands. The indie game Tunic is in a way all about this connection. Throughout the game's world, there are the layers of ruins upon ruins that one would expect from any Moldy world worth its salt, but there are also pages of a faux instructional guidebook for you to collect. This strategy guide comes marked with all the little signs of age you'd expect from such a booklet, with various sections including pen doodles or notes written into the margins by an imagined player, and I know I filled my old guides with scribbles like these. Such marks are proof of history in the same way a piece of wreckage is, a testimony that someone has been here before. How much comfort one can find in the records of moldiness ultimately comes down to individual philosophy. There is a portion of me that is uneasy when I see the wreckage of civilizations past, be they real or virtual, and know they were once as uneroded by time as we are now. But there is also a portion of me that is comforted to see evidence of those that have walked before me, that the world has endured long before this sliver of time, and will continue long after. A moldy setting is a realistic one, a storied one, a living one. Maybe the past.
So Global said from Brian Eno, I'm not sure. Whatever you now find weird, ugly, uncomfortable, and nasty about a new medium will surely become its signature. CD distortion, the jitteriness of digital video, the crap sound of 8 bits, all of these will be cherished and emulated as soon as they can be avoided. It's true, and that's something that I've been noticing and remarking for like a number of years now, just how many Gen Z bands seem to be like returning to a kind of 80s/90s aesthetic, which is just kind of odd and ironic to me because they weren't really part of that generation, which that stuff was like catered toward. What's the other thing? Like the Taco Bell cup, or no, not Taco Bell cup, just like the mall cup, like the Neopop wave type thing. Like that's a whole vibe that a lot of people really enjoy and like are trying to bring back and go with it. Like Magdalena Bay, pretty much all of their videos have like a very 90s, super early 2000s computery type vibe to them. I have a friend who records a lot of shows, like music shows, gigs in San Francisco, and he uses like analog footage from like a camera that was like made in like 1998 or something like that. So it's definitely a certain kind of a vibe and aesthetic that people enjoy, even though like technologically we've come way beyond that point. So it's just kind of funny to me because I don't really feel like we had perhaps quite as much of that with other decades like the 60s and 70s. Now don't get me wrong, there's always been like period pieces and stuff, and maybe I was just like not part of groups that were interested in older things like that, but like with the exception of like that 70s show, I can't really think of a lot of people who are emulating that like 70s style, except for like a few bands like Tennis, which is also like another crazy thing to me. Hey Stella B, nice to see you again. Asenex said, want to talk about lost history? Ask about Native American tongues. We've lost so many languages. Yes. Sad. Halo of the Sun, welcome back in. At first, I thought you were giving yourself a Mao level introduction there. All right, here we go.
Past is not reclaimable. Maybe what is rotted has rotted for good. But even if something thoroughly digested cannot be regurgitated, it can still feed the growth of something new. There is beauty in decomposition, waiting to be dug up.
Oh, that's gross. I don't really know what I was expecting.
There's one massive unanswered question that making this video left me with. How many of these settings actually qualify as post-apocalyptic? Is Fallout post-apocalyptic? Is Breath of the Wild post-apocalyptic? Is Lord of the Rings post-apocalyptic? In all cases, it's not a straightforward answer, because, as I discovered, there's another stage that comes after what we traditionally think of the post-apocalypse. I ended up having so much to say on this topic that I couldn't fit it into the conclusion of this video, so
that's kind of a bunch of interesting questions right there, asking whether or not Lord of the Rings is post-apocalyptic. My initial response would be no, but then if you think back about like the kind of different epochs of Lord of the Rings, you could say it's like post-apocalypses. I think he brought that up earlier in the video as well to a degree. But for me, I would kind of make the argument that it doesn't seem like a post-apocalyptic type of story setting because it is flourishing in a way which the civilization doesn't seem to be struggling as a direct consequence of the apocalypse. Whereas to me, a post-apocalyptic setting would be something more akin to Fallout. So even though the apocalypse for them has happened, how many years? Like 300 years before the setting of the games and the series, it's still feeling the direct after effects of those actions, which have been kind of, reverberating throughout all that history there. So, Moth Crab, nice to see you again. The Lords of the Ring world used to be flat until God bent it into a sphere. It sounds like a complete meme. Hell yeah, Stella, get rid of that job and get yourself a good one. So yeah, best of luck with all that. I know periods of transition can be pretty stressful, to say the least. But I'm glad that you're excited, to be sure. So Rooster Rick was saying that the 70s style was huge in the late 90s and early aughts. Boho fashion? I don't remember boho fashion. The strokes, white stripes, etc. Was that a 70s vibe? Looking up what the heck boho fashion is. Oh, that kind of thing. I see what you mean. I guess perhaps one of the biggest differences why I feel like it isn't quite the same as what I was talking about, and I'm not like trying to criticize you, is how nowadays we have, it seems like there's a lot more access to do it yourself type stuff, and the kids that I see doing their own it yourselves tend to be doing a more 90s, early thousands type deal as opposed to really just having like a lot less of that in the 90s and thousands where people could emulate a more of a 70s style, perhaps. And I mean that in terms of like film and stuff like that. And of course, like probably one of the other biggest limiting factors to it was home filmography, cinematography. It would be not really realized for a lot of people until like the 80s at the earliest and the 90s, and then it kind of exploded from there. So that's probably a big factor as well now that I think about it. It's fun to think about though. Hilko, a friend once introduced you to the Beatles like they were a new thing. That's funny. I mean, I can kind of believe it though, because now I would say like the younger generation is so divorced from like boomers and stuff that they probably may not have had a lot of exposure to the Beatles if their parents were Gen X or even millennials now. And also, didn't they come out with that movie? It's like, hey, what would have happened if this one dude was in a world that existed without the Beatles, and so he just plagiarized all their songs? It's kind of a funny idea as well. I did not watch that movie though.
Instead, I made an entire second video where I dive deep into worlds like Akapura Games' Rain World and Ghibli's Castle in the Sky, both of which originally played a much larger role in this essay, but ultimately didn't fit and deserved their own dedicated video. You can watch this other video right now exclusively on Nebula. That's not all though, because Nebula isn't just the place to watch my videos early and ad-free, it's the best place to watch hundreds of other creators and more, including...
Is that right? Let's see if his post-apocalypse shows up on his channel. We're going to cheat. We're in the future. I totally misread that. It said, and I read it as, what happens if God's a poop? A dip poop. Anyway, I can't read. You all know that. Dang it, it is only on Nebula, apparently. Looks like we all have to get Nebula now. Oh, that's kind of funny that he did cover Blasphemous at some point. Because I was just thinking that it was a little bit unfortunate that there were no Blasphemous references that I remembered seeing in the video so far.
Some really incredible original productions that are showing how Nebula is pushing the industry forward. Tom Nicholas's Boomers, a 2-hour documentary on the legacy of baby boomers, just dropped. Nebula is
It's legitimately fascinating. Hey Faust, welcome back into the stream. You like Lapta as well?
remarkable platform, enabling creators like myself to bring you consistent, high-quality videos, all while offering a wide range of exclusive content that's on a whole other level from what we could make on our own. So sign up for Nebula today at just $3 a month on the yearly plan at nebula.tv/curiousarchive. Plus, every Nebula subscriber gets guest passes to share everything on Nebula with friends or family for a week, and no payment info required to redeem. That's nebula.tv/curiousarchive to check out all my exclusive videos and so much more. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this entry, please lend your support by liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification icon to stay up to date on all things curious.
Bro, I saw this the other day and I got so annoyed that there's this stupid Gemini ask button now. Should just disable it.
See you in the next video.
Halo says Nebula is a mash of war. I do feel like Nebula baits a lot of people into using it at inopportune times. Because just from the few people that I've seen use it, they just try to use it a lot and then they just get punished a lot for it. It's very situational. Faust says, Blasphemous has a proper lore now, doesn't it? You remember stuff from before the DLCs? It was a lot more speculative back then. So I would say so. I'm not crazy deep into the Blasphemous lore, but there is a lot more meat on the bones, especially with the DLC that got added into Blasphemous 2 right when I started playing it. So yeah, that was a fun video. Definitely echoed many of the thoughts that I had. I enjoyed the Whitebird observation there. So now we do have one other video on the list for tonight, and then I might need to figure out what I want to do after that. So let's check out A Tragedies. The Erdtree is a Stamen, Elden Ring lore. Stella swears to God that if they keep putting AI no one wants in anything, there's going to be a Butlerian jihad. Okay. Stella's going to get the FBI snooping in the chat now.
All right, you saw the title. I've gone off the deep end again, but I really think I'm onto something with this one. And I'll just cut to the chase right now.
Man, my dude is talking fast. Let me fix the YouTube frame rate crap again. At least we got a little bit further in the night before it started being super garbage.
The Erdtree is not a tree. It's actually the stamen of the crucible. Now hold on, don't click off, don't start typing, just hold on. Let me cook for a second. So this all started when I was wrapping up the DLC. And I was looking up some of
the gameplay is literally just me getting lost trying to remember where the dragon is with the key to the academy behind it, by the way. Enjoy.
craftable items in the DLC.
So he's going the wrong way. He needs to be going northwest.
And at some point, I came across a charming branch. And one of the ingredients that had been sitting in my inventory for pretty much the whole playthrough that I paid no attention to was the Empyrean Blood Burgeon. Growing around the areas where Mikola divested himself of his gold are little burgeons that grew from his blood. Now, look at the pictures for both of these items. This right here is where everything started clicking and I lost my mind. Then I did some Googling and I have not seen anyone talking about this. I may have missed it, but
bam! Look, it's the Stamen. And look, Radagon is the Erdtree because he's America, and America is the Erdtree because they both have the Elden Ring. Got him.
I hope that after this video, you'll be as confused as to why no one's talking about it as I am.
The flower crucible.
Let me try to give you a peek into how my brain descended into madness. Went something like this. I looked at the DLC incantation, Aspects of the Crucible, Bloom. The incantation summons a Miranda flower on the user's chest that calls down a rain of light. But who cares about that? Why is it that an aspect of the Crucible spell blooms a flower? And why specifically a Miranda flower? What even is a Miranda flower? So of course the next step is to look up what is a Miranda flower. And that brought me to the Miranda's Prayer cut content item description, which reads, Miranda, Maiden of the Flower Crucible, is said to have been the very first of this breed. I'm sorry, the Maiden of the what crucible? And what's up with the statement on this flower? It really kinda looks like, no, that can't be right. Then
The stamen on that flower.
and what's up with the statement?
Looks like I closed it. Looks like this, doesn't it? Wait, what the hell? Gallery, that's annoying. Hey guys, it does look different, but anyway.
On this flower. It really kinda looks like, no, that can't be right. Then I went to the next page on Google and saw there was a boss fight with a Miranda flower that I've never encountered.
That one should be in, I think that one's not called the Perfumery Ruin. It's the one with the Estelle, not like the actual Estelle. It's it's the cave right next to the outer rampart of Lanedel's Gate by the Falling Star Beast.
Okay, so let me get a look at this boss fight. And there's an omen killer there. Time to look up their lore. So it turns out one of them was a perfumer named Rollo. Wait a minute, can't perfume be made from flowers? At this point, I'm pretty sure I'm onto something. So next up is the perfumer's lore. I scroll down their wiki page and read some of the lore, see Rollo there obviously, but then as I'm reading the description of the perfumer's traveling garb, what do I see?
Mendacious Cat says, sharks are older than trees, but no, you don't see any of those in the lands between. Don't you dare. Do you not dare put that juju into this Elden Ring. Have you not played Bloodborne, you heathen? If you have, you would recant your heresy this instant. Lobsters are bad enough, I know, right? So much botany in the game should have been called the Elden Vegetation. Liurnia is ripe for land sharks. How dare you guys?
An associate of a healer, he is said to be in search of new aromatics and flower gardens in hopes of treating misbegotten, omen, and all those seen as impure. Okay, so there was a perfumer who became an omen killer. An omen killer is in a Miranda flower boss fight. And here we see there was a perfumer trying to heal omen with flowers. Wait, so omen can be healed with flowers. Connected to the crucible. An aspect of the crucible incantation that blooms a flower, and wham bam, right there, the crucible's a flower, it hit me right there. And then check out the description for Miranda powder. Throughout history, perfumers have prized this extremely fragrant form of Miranda pollen not yet scattered into the air. You gotta be kidding me.
It's all about the flowers, man.
A very chaotic mix of ideas entered my brain after I made this realization. The very first thing that came to mind was butterflies. Yes, those butterflies. Each of them connected to one of Marika's children. And what are butterflies? Pollinators. For those that may not know, pollinators carry the pollen from the stamen of a flower to the pistil, or more specifically the stigma at the top, whatever, of either another flower or the same flower. And then I got hit with a whammy wham bam. Who do we know that has one body with both male and female reproductive organs and self-reproduces? Marika and Radigan, who, of course,
Melina.
reside with
I meant Melina, damn it, the names are too similar. My joke.
The Erdtree until we, evict them. Now, take a look at the Miranda flower. You see it. I know you see it. Stop playing games. The Erdtree is a damn stamen. But wait, Miquella and St. Trina, they both have flowers. In fact, St. Trina basically is a flower. Miquella is an Empyrean along with his twin sister, who in the process of becoming a goddess, literally becomes a blooming flower. Now, my mind works in insane ways, so I'm going to try my best to explain how I got to the next idea.
The age of quote-unquote plenty. So, yeah. I definitely respect this dude's hustle. I had some of these crazy thoughts as well. I brought them up on the Discord to torment you guys. So, if you guys like getting tormented by stuff like that, the Discord is the place to be, because it doesn't show up in the Googles.
Now, randomly, that fool Tialier's questline popped into my mind. And it was the part where we had to, against our will I might add, take St. Trina's nectar. Then I remembered that Tialier called it ambrosia, which of course I learned after looking up what it meant, is a Greek mythological term talking about a honey-like substance that grants immortality. Honey, of course, is made by bees from nectar. And here we go. My mind turned back to Marika, who used to give out what? Sap from the Erdtree. Only now, I don't think it was sap. Now, there are many bits of lore that have like entire videos dedicated to them by actual good lore YouTubers that would take way too long to explain here, but just trust me for a second. There are catacombs throughout the lands between where people would be buried and consumed by parts of the Erdtree in order to be reborn out of the Erdtree. Now, this happened during the Age of Plenty, which in my headcanon is like an ending of a prequel game where Marika was the playable character. This Age of Plenty came to an end, and along with it, Erdtree burials and the receiving of sap. Now, there isn't too much known about the Age of Plenty, but let's go with the flower theory. In this theory, the sap would actually be nectar or honey made from it. And what do flowers use nectar for? To entice pollinators to come to the plant and get to pollinate that thing. Now here's another insane connection my mind somehow made. Remember that cut content item, Miranda's Prayer? Well, I didn't share the first part of that item's description earlier. It reads, "This statuette depicts a flower that preys on humans posed in prayer." That's right.
I'm glad he's getting to this point, because I was going to bring up the, what's the word? What do you call a meat eater? Carnivoristic, nature of the Miranda flowers, if you didn't get there.
Right. The Miranda flower, both the real one and the Elden Ring version, is carnivorous. And if the Miranda flower is actually a representation of the flower crucible, then it would likely follow that the crucible was also a carnivorous flower. You see where I'm going with this?
So yeah, one of the neater actual environmental lore details of the Miranda flowers themselves is that you can often find them surrounding arteria leaves, which are plants that have like blood within them. So you could surmise that the Miranda flowers are kind of feeding themselves off of the blood of arteria leaves and stuff. And from blood, we do know that gold does flow. So this whole carnivorous stuff and the pollen of the Miranda flowers may be related to gold or essentially recycled bits of dead matter. But not literally, but kind of also, because this is a FromSoft game and they like to be weird like that. So I don't really think he's entirely off base with these kind of jumps, believe it or not, with maybe the exception of definitively claiming that the Erdtree itself is a stamen, although, you know, it's fun to entertain these kind of ideas. Is there any hidden humanoid shape in the Miranda flowers? Not exactly that I can recall, but you can find Miranda flowers that have two golden eyes, essentially. Elden said, "Gold flowing from the blood? Am I referring to beast blood?" Yes, I am. As well as golden poop. Because poop gets its color from blood.
Erdtree, during the Age of Plenty, was fed bodies. Why would someone let their bodies be consumed by the Erdtree? Well, they were enticed by that sweet, sweet nectar to partake in Marika's religion, which they believed would grant them a form of immortality, being reborn through the Erdtree. See, I don't think it's a coincidence that the Erdtree burial stopped when the sap stopped being given out. I think it was part of that reincarnation process. It was the...
You could also make the argument coming from the other perspective that the sap stopped coming out once the Erdtree burials perhaps stopped, maybe due to conquering everybody, running out of people to continue to feed into the Erdtree, or maybe the Erdtree could have just been a normal mortal object, and eventually lost its luster and was beginning to age too much, even though it's a tree. So I digress.
The ambrosia. I think it was part of that reincarnation process. It was the ambrosia, the nectar of life. But see, my insanity does not stop there. Now look at this. Check out the item description for the Erdtree flower. Said to grow from the old fallen leaves of the Erdtree. I'm not reading anymore. What do you mean the leaves fall to the ground and turn into flowers? What are we talking about here?
Ooh, baby. I wonder if he's going to get to the point that I've been cooking up but not bothering to release for a long time because it's as schizo as it sounds. So to maybe cut this dude off and share the thoughts, which I've shared before, like hundreds of times, maybe not that many, on the streams throughout, this endeavor, is that the Erdtree, or the nature of the Erdtree, changed, and the fallen leaves of the old Erdtree are what those kind of early flowers came from, whereas now we have a new incarnation of the Erdtree potentially brought about with Radagon's reign, and that's why they don't really have that issue in Altus Plateau. So let me look up the Erdtree flower descriptions, because there's another one that I'm forgetting right now. So, okay, we have the faded Erdtree flower as well as the normal Erdtree flower. So the first one is, oh no, is that the issue? Wait, no. Wait, do they have the same description? Virtually the same, even in the Japanese. Oh, wait, no, I always forget it. It's the Erdtree flowers aren't important because the faded ones are affected by scarlet rot. It's all the golden and sunflowers and stuff, so never mind. I'll leave that alone for now. But it's said to be fed by leaves that fell from the Erdtree in days of antiquity, which I think has a thematic connection to the tarnished golden sunflowers. And I think the tarnished golden sunflowers were fed by the Erdtree in antiquity, and the current golden sunflowers, which are only found on Altus Plateau, are influenced by Radagon's Erdtree in closer proximity. And I still need to reconcile some of that idea with the fact that we have the shadow sunflowers in the Skidoo realms. So, yeah. And yes, Mao, the Age of Plenty could have stopped because people stopped dying as Destined Death was removed. That is another possibility I've thought of as well, which is why ages ago I tried looking into the timelines of figuring out when Spirit Ashes were created, because I have legitimately wondered if Spirit Ashes were only a thing post-Shattering or if they predated the Shattering. And the only piece of evidence that could possibly suggest that the Spirit Ash practice of the ashes not returning properly to the Erdtree happening before the Shattering could be the fact that what's her name, Black Knife Teach, is a Spirit Ash, and she participated in the Night of the Black Knives, and she might have died before the Shattering, or even if she did, maybe the Erdtree didn't have enough time to absorb her into the roots. Anyway, long story short, I don't know when Spirit Ashes originally came to be. Although I guess now I might need to reconsider some stuff with like the Shadowlands, because we have like Telu, the golem guy. But also the Shadowlands are in a completely different region, and the spirits there get engraved into the bark of the Skidoo tree, so I don't know. It wasn't the Age of Plenty, but the Age of Planty? Okay, see what you did there. Rooster says flowers grow on trees? Not exactly, unless you mean like, not, like, that trees themselves don't necessarily grow flowers, but external flowers can grow on trees is somewhat true, but not like natural. I mean, it is natural, but what's the word? It's not part of like a tree's life cycle. Not native, that's the word. Mao says trees have flowers. Oh yeah, that's true. What am I thinking? But they're like different, perhaps. Maybe not, but botanically. I'm not a botanist.
Let's get to the last bit of insanity.
Why am I like this?
This next part is full of ideas that are difficult for me to piece together, which is also part of why I wanted to make this video in the first place. I'm hoping that talking about this will spark something in someone else's brain and be like, oh, wait a minute, that explains X or Y. And I'll be like, great. So let me share with you some of the stuff that's kind of like unfinished that there's a connection there. I don't know why, but my brain, I've never been wrong once, not once ever in my life. Now, we all know about the centipede death mark bred on the Goblin and Ronnie on the Night of the Black Knives. Well,
okay, so I figured out how I want to phrase it. So a tree is an entire organism, a flower isn't necessarily. So that's kind of like the biggest difference. So when you say flowers grow on trees, that sounds like a secondary type thing as opposed to saying some trees flower. Flowers are a conspiracy? Oh no. Yes, Faust. Trees can also grow from grafting. True. All right, let me back this up a little bit.
Why, but my brain, I've never been wrong once, not once ever in my life. Now, we all know about the centipede death mark bred on the Goblin and Ronnie on the Night of the Black Knives.
He totally said goblin, I swear.
Well, this got me thinking about Romina and the Church of the Bud. Why? Well, she's part centipede, which is weird, butterfly, scorpion, and she wields a weapon formed from a bud and is in a Church of the Bud or whatever that means. That's something to do with death, Children of Marka, Scarlet Rot, and then possibly the Flower Crucible. But I can't figure out what my brain is trying to do with all that. So I move on. The Erdtree and the Erdtree have avatars. Now, why is it that the Erdtree has an avatar that's a sunflower? Then you go to the Erdtree avatar. What does this look like? This looks like a rotting flower that is not bloomed. And then look over here at Radagon's icon. And now look at this picture of Miranda's flower stamen.
Hey.
Y'all seeing this? It can't just be me who sees him growing out of that stamen, can it? It can't. Look, I don't know what to do with all this, but something is going on. And I hope this video can reach people who may be able to figure out what. Thanks so much for watching. Wait! If you're here for the animations, I'm cooking up one right now. See you soon.
All right, so that was a fun little video. I don't know if I'd agree implicitly that the Erdtree is a stamen, but I think a lot of these observations are strong as well. As the next said, that was a theory. Mendacious Cat says, anyway, I don't know what to do with all this. Okay, bye. I mean, he's keeping it real. I respect the hell out of that. In many ways, that takes a lot more bravery than what I've been doing, where I'm just kind of idly sitting by, steepling my fingers and saying, ah, yes, interesting. I'm going crazy. Anyway. So that was what I had queued up for the night. I do have some other stuff in the queue that I haven't gotten to yet, but haven't yet. I don't know what I want to watch. So tomorrow I may as well spill the beans. Since you guys have been kind of asking for it, I thought it'd be perhaps interesting to check out my old video on Silver and Gold, Life and Death, and re-examine it with the lens of the DLC, because there's a lot of really good stuff here, and this video, probably more than most of my other ones, had a lot of things left unsaid and kind of implied. So there seems to be like a lot of stuff that comes up in the natural course of conversation on the Discord, which I feel like this video has touched on, but maybe didn't have as much impact as I would have liked. So that one might be really interesting to re-examine. So I have that one queued up after what Bloodborne is actually about by the soul of a game. So we have a bit more time, so I probably want to check out a video that's like 20 minutes long or something like that, if I have anything super handy right now. And of course, if you guys have videos you want me to react to, you can always do so with the comments on my videos, like my streams, but not the chat box, because I won't get a notification and therefore I'll forget. Or again on my Discord, and the link is at the top of the chat if you guys want to join there, and also in the video descriptions. So I could also look down here, huh? Oh no, you guys are gonna get all my game recommendations, game trailers. That tends to be what I get on this account. Not sure. All right, Ask Next, you have a good night. Thanks for joining. You can watch the Illusory Wall video you posted. The only thing about Illusory Walls videos is like they're 2 minutes. And like they're okay, but they tend to just be close-ups of things that I've looked at independently. Suggest videos I've already watched. Oh wait, Illusory Wall has a 30-minute video? All right, let me look. Which one? Oh wait, Global Sequence suggested. When did you suggest this? I don't see anything super recent. LP, you mentioned a video about gold and silver. Is it on my channel? Yes. So it's even already on the playlist right here. So if you just type in silver and gold, life and death in Elden Ring, that'll be good enough to get you there. Hey, Little Church Lore, nice to see you again. Oh, did you say it's like on here? Illusory Wall. I don't see it. I'm blind. Going too fast. Oh, you're saying the date, 3:30. Hold on. So I'm in August. I need to go back. Maybe the search function is just sucking. Oh, okay. I see it now. Dark Souls Dissected, Miracle Resonance. Okay. We can certainly do that one. No, I don't need the message link. I need this.
Hello, and welcome.
I didn't even know Illusory Wall had a voice. This is weird. Wait, no, we already had it. Okay. Let's watch old Jerry Springer clips. H-E-Naw. Mendacious Cat, you posted one about Ensha being the Sun Lord. You didn't watch it? Okay. There's a Garrulous Gold Mask vid about Mesmer defeating Ensha, Lord of the Sun Realm. I'm a little bit nervous about watching that one. Okay, here we go. Dark Souls Dissected, number 11, Miracle Resonance. I really have no idea what to expect. There's a lot of mechanical stuff that's goofy with the Dark Souls franchise that I don't know very much about.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Dark Souls Dissected. It's been a while, but we're finally back to Dark Souls 1. Today we're going to take a close look at Miracle Resonance, or Miracle Synergy, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I've definitely seen these spherical things and been like, what the hell is this? I think there was one that always was permanently there for me after fighting the Iron Giant or Iron Golem, whatever it's called. Surely it's not the same title as that one animated movie, is it? I don't know. Oh, here we go.
It's something I find very fascinating. Coming from Demon Souls, it was another creative online feature that was new to Dark Souls 1. But unfortunately, it also happens to be the series' most broken and forgotten mechanic.
Yeah, I've still never seen a Vagrant. Like, obviously not from my play, at least.
So before we explore Miracle Resonance in detail, I will have to address the elephant in the room first. A lot of people who've played Dark Souls 1 are going to say that they've either never seen this before, or they've only seen it a handful of times over a couple of playthroughs. But this isn't supposed to be a rare event like vagrants. These floating white rings, you should be seeing them pretty often if you're online. Granted, not as much as bloodstains or ghosts, but it really shouldn't be a long wait until you find one in any PvP hotspot. So if they've been rare for you, it's because this mechanic isn't working as intended. We don't actually have any good answers as to why it isn't working correctly in Dark Souls Remastered, but we'll talk more about its legacy of being broken later. Just bear in mind that, as I'm explaining how it works, there are reasons for its rarity that aren't inherent to the core mechanics being discussed. Now, with that being said, let's get started.
To be fair, most of my playthroughs have been offline. Mostly because when I first played through Dark Souls and beat it, I was in the middle of the ocean, and then the other times I tended to have been gathering like footage for lore videos, and having the stupid ass ghosts run around all the time is super annoying for gathering footage, at least for me. Yeah, I played Prepare to Die edition. That's the version that I have on my computer still. What is Miracle Resonance?
Miracle Resonance is another asynchronous online feature unique to Dark Souls 1. When players cast certain miracles in their own game, white rings of light will be sent across the network to other players in the exact same location where the miracle was cast. Standing near one of these will, in turn, buff certain miracles, essentially creating an indirect form of co-op for faith builds. The idea being that, through your shared faith, your miracles can become a little stronger.
That's pretty cool, and also I had no idea Wrath of Gods actually did that much damage. I wonder if that was just like a super OP character or something like that.
These white rings, which I call Miracle Resonance signs, appear identical to the Ring of Light found at the end of Sen's Fortress.
Hey guys, I was wrong. I've never seen one of those once then. I misunderstood.
Only they're white and not yellow. Their visual effect was redone for Dark Souls Remastered, and it's one of the visual changes that's a marked improvement. It looks more purposeful and mysterious, and less like something that might be mistaken for your lock-on reticle glitching out. This is yet another Dark Souls 1 mechanic that was always lacking in specifics as to how it works, and took quite a while to get solid information nailed down. Some of the common speculation from back in the day was that using a certain miracle would boost that same miracle, or perhaps there were different classes of miracles like offensive ones boosting other offensive ones.
That's pretty cool, going back through super old like Reddit posts to see what people thought at the time. It's kind of fun. So Mendacious Cat and Halo were telling me that Wrath of Gods could have one-shot people in PvP with the right build. I had no idea. Like, the way that I thought Wrath of Gods worked was you just stood next to a cliff and booped them. Because I may have done that a time or two.
But I discovered that what spawns them and what benefits from them is a lot simpler than that. There's just 4 specific miracles that can create Miracle Resonance signs, and 9 miracles that can be buffed by them. It doesn't have anything to do with what covenant you're in. Sort of. I'll talk more about that later, but Covenant's basically irrelevant, and there isn't anything like a complicated pairing system. It also doesn't have any requirements like needing to be human or being within any kind of level range of the other player. Here's the 4 miracles that can create them. Bountiful Sunlight, Soothing Sunlight, Great Heal, and Wrath of the Gods. Bearing in mind that Bountiful and Soothing...
What is... These icons are so high quality. Were they like touched up? Because they look way better than what you get from the game's assets as far as I know. Or these are from Remastered? That might be it.
Sunlight are locked behind the Princess Guard Covenant, and that they both have a really high faith requirement. This means that the vast majority of resonance signs you run into are probably actually just created by Great Heal and Wrath of the Gods. So 4 technically work, but it's 2 that are doing the heavy lifting. The 9 miracles that can be buffed are Heal, Great Heal Excerpt, Great Heal, Force, Emit Force, Wrath of the Gods, Replenishment, Bountiful Sunlight, and Soothing Sunlight. So you'll notice that the same 4 miracles that can create them are, unsurprisingly, also ones that can benefit from them. But there's an additional 5 miracles here that are just recipients of this mechanic. This means that any miracle not mentioned here has nothing to do with Miracle Resonance and doesn't play a role here. How it works is simply standing near one of these resonance signs will buff any of those 9 miracles, and there is an indication in the HUD to help clarify that it's working. But it's not displayed under the stamina bar like other status effects. Instead, you'll notice a corresponding ring of light appear over the miracle itself. Seeing this means the buff will be present if you cast your miracle. Sometimes it's difficult to see when the miracle's icon is fully lit up, so it's easier to see if the miracle is grayed out from offhanding your talisman. The miracle resonance sign isn't something you pick up, you just have to remain near it for it to work. And it can also be used repeatedly until it goes away on its own. It's here based on a timer system and will appear and disappear completely independently of whether I use it or not. So what creates resonance signs and what benefits from them is really just 2 simple lists. But where it starts to get weird is when we start talking about resonance level.
Mendacious Cat says, quote, "What's this white ring in Undead Burg is almost a meme for how commonly was asked online. That's awesome." Resonance level.
Because this is Dark Souls 1, we should expect nothing less than complicated subsystems for obscure mechanics, and we do find that here with resonance level. Well, the basic concept isn't too out there. If you stand near multiple resonance signs, you can get even stronger buffs. There are 4 resonance levels total, with resonance level 1 being the weakest, and resonance level 4 being the strongest. And these all have corresponding indicators in the HUD, where the ring of light grows thicker. But experiencing levels 3 and 4 must have been incredibly rare, even when this mechanic was working correctly. I'm talking far, far more rare than even running into vagrants. To this day, the Wikidot page only includes images for what the first 2 resonance levels look like in the HUD. This isn't because we didn't have access to the textures for all of them, but because we never experienced them in-game. And so I omitted levels 3 and 4 from the wiki, due to being unsure if they were unused content. It took hacking from Drift Item, years later, to confirm that levels 3 and 4 were also technically possible in-game. Here's the breakdown. Standing next to 1 or more resonance signs gives you level 1, 3 or more causes level 2, 6 or more causes level 3, and 10 causes level 4. So yeah, you can probably imagine how we were never able to confirm those higher levels in the wild. Even getting resonance
Yeah, 10 seems absolutely wild.
level 2 probably sounds like a rare event. What are the odds that 3 signs are going to show up at the same time and all closely together? But this wasn't as unreasonable as it sounds, because
I'm curious about the range for this as well. Like, if you could step over there and still get buff from these things, I'd be like, damn, it's pretty good. Should have been a faith build back in the day. Imagine the holiness. Just gotta
really
believe, bro.
All 3. This is where the Ring of the Sun Princess comes in. The Ring of the Sun Princess is acquired by joining the Princess Guard, but its use isn't restricted to the Covenant, so you can always just take it and then leave. Its description is as follows. This ring is granted to those who enter a covenant with Guinevere, daughter of Lord Gwyn and the Princess of Sunlight. The slightly warm ring boosts the synergy of miracles. If you've ever put it on, you might have noticed that it gave you the buff without standing near a resonance sign. So what exactly is it doing? For a while, I thought it was maybe acting like a portable resonance sign. My best understanding of it was just imagining that a resonance sign was permanently following you around so long as you were wearing it. This didn't turn out to be totally correct, though, and is something else that Drift Item helped discover where my initial testing left off. It turns out that the Ring of the Sun Princess just directly adds +1 to your resonance level, completely independent of how many resonance signs you're standing near. I should mention that the game caps at loading 10 resonance signs into your game altogether, and even if you somehow manage to stand near 10 signs at once and equip the ring, it's not going to stack further into a 5th resonance level. It does.
Hey Chadwick, welcome back. You asked, how does resonance rings show up to begin with? You never came across them in your time with Dark Souls. So he's implying that they probably got bugged, but the way they're originally supposed to work was by casting 4 different types of incantations, it could allow them to spawn in the corresponding spot in other players' worlds. But apparently it got broken somehow.
Cap at 4. So what kinds of awesome, overpowered stuff does Miracle Resonance allow? Well, don't get too excited. On the realistic end of the spectrum, we're talking mostly about minor buffs. But what does it do exactly when some spells are offensive, others are healative, And there's also Force, which doesn't do any damage at all. Well, we just kind of have to look at each one individually, so let's start with Force. Increasing your resonance level will increase the radius of the Force Blast. It's a little difficult to visualize the incremental differences in game, but here's an example of the player character floating half a unit above the ground. This is how much the radius of Force increases with each resonance level. It starts with a default radius of 2, and works its way all the way up to a radius of 4. So you can potentially double the size of the Force Blast. This is something we can visualize with the help of Wrath of the Gods, as that has a default radius of 4 to begin with. So on the left we see the default maximum distance for the Force Blast, and on the right we can see how large it would become at resonance level 4.
That's kind of a lot farther than I would have expected, although of course that was a crazy resonance level.
Now onto Wrath of the Gods. If that starts at radius 4, how big does that become? Well, actually, its size doesn't get changed at all. Instead, we just see an increase to the damage. Wrath of the Gods by default deals 280 magic damage, and this increases by 10 with each resonance level.
Does that interact with scaling at all? I'd be curious to learn that. Bear in mind this doesn't simply mean a flat increase of 10 damage each time. Actual damage depends on a variety of factors like damage scaling and defense calculations. If only I played the video for an extra half a second.
Now, Emit Force happens to combine the previous two buffs, expanding both the size of the blast and its damage. It's following the same increase by 10 formula for the damage, but its size instead is only increasing by a quarter of a unit this time. Just as a quick aside, this is the first time I've happened to look at these exact numbers, and it really helps explain a lot as to why Emit Force always felt so difficult to use compared to Wrath of the Gods. Of course, we'd expect a projectile version of the spell to have to be weaker in some ways, but there really is a massive difference between the hit radii here. Again, by default, Wrath of the Gods is 4, while Emit Force is a measly 1.5, meaning its explosion isn't even half as large. Now, with the offensive miracles out of the way, let's take a look at the regenerative healing ones. There are 2 miracles that heal you over time, Replenishment and Bountiful Sunlight. These miracles both work the same and increase your health by the same amount. It gives you 10 HP per second over the course of 60 seconds, increasing all the way to 20 HP per second at resonance level 4. So this leaves us with just 4 more healing miracles. These are all standard single refills of health, similar to Estus. And here's how they improve with each resonance level. Again, these numbers aren't absolute. They will increase more health with scaling, but it gives you an idea for the base numbers involved. So now that we know how this is supposed to work, where did this mechanic go wrong?
A history of bugginess.
I mentioned earlier that this mechanic is broken in Dark Souls Remastered, but the original version of the game isn't off the hook either. As much as I'd love to give a detailed breakdown of what's wrong with it, I don't think anyone knows exactly what the source of the problem is. It seemed to work okay for the most part on Xbox 360 and PC, but it was essentially completely broken on the PlayStation 3. I remember the community reaction to seeing players stream on Xbox, while PlayStation players looked on and said, "Hey, what are those white rings exactly?"
Nice one.
Just take a look at this video from Ouroboros in 2013 on Xbox.
Yeah, Ouroboros is definitely an OG of the stuff.
It gives us a glimpse of how the Forest should look when there's a bunch of people spamming Wrath of the Gods there. He even achieves resonance level 2 on several occasions. What happened on PS3 is
he cheating.
The game would go through phases where Miracle Resonance worked fine for a brief window of time, and then stopped working. Then the game would get patched, it would start working again, and then it would break again later on. So it wasn't updates that introduced new glitches or broke anything. Updates would actually jumpstart the mechanic, only for it to quickly die soon after. And the patch notes never really mentioned Miracle Resonance either. It was kind of a secret fix and break. It seems like something bad might have accumulated each time and messed things up. How it was broken was interesting. It wasn't always entirely absent. There were periods of time where it was locked to a specific location. Throughout the majority of patch 1.05, which was the bulk of the game's lifespan before the DLC came out a year after its release, 2 resonance signs appeared in very specific locations in the catacombs and nowhere else in-game. I'm sure you could probably find some footage of this, but here's an old cell phone photo I took showing it. This is the hallway with the last necromancer, down by the bone wheel skeletons. The signs appeared and disappeared with uneven intervals that didn't work in the way we expect. Sometimes they'd go away, but you wouldn't have to wait long to see them come back, so they were somewhat permanently there. This suggests to me that they had their location data bugged, so what everyone on PlayStation 3 was seeing was resonance signs that should have been found elsewhere. At this point in time, the mechanic wasn't understood very well, so I took full advantage of it. I used this hallway to help craft an exact list of all the miracles that work with it. I was able to test the difference between resonance levels 1 and 2 by equipping the Ring of the Sun Princess here. So despite being broken, it was the first major breakthrough in learning some actual details about it. A few updates later, and we're left with a similar situation. To this day, you can find a single miracle resonance sign on PS3. It's now found in a particular spot in the Darkroot Forest. It's been this way ever since not long after the last patch happened in May of 2013.
Elden Ring asks, have they done any Elden Ring videos? Oh yeah, Illusory Wall is got a lot of Elden Ring stuff if I'm remembering correctly. So... answering 20 questions about poise. He talks about that with Radon. The map keeps changing. This was a really good video. The hidden map changes. Fall damage stuff. Oh yeah, that was definitely helpful. I remember looking at that when I made my Steed test video with Torrent. Because... oh no, that was not that video. My video where, like... I definitely hit the death box when going to the Bestial Sanctum because that patch broke the game. So I've actually unlisted that video from my channel because they fixed it. But it's kind of funny that you would like drop 3 feet with Torrent and then just suddenly die over there. Man, look at this absolute gangster with his Elite Knight set plus the Zweihander. He's ballin'.
So, is the same thing happening in Dark Souls Remastered? Well, it doesn't appear that way. People do spot them every now and again, and they don't seem to be locked to any single location. So maybe it was partially fixed, or just got broken in a different way. The problem this time is that they're incredibly rare in Dark Souls Remastered, when we know they're not supposed to be. The frustrating part is that I saw this coming from miles away. Before we even knew exactly what the network test for Dark Souls Remastered was going to look like, I correctly speculated that Miracle Resonance wasn't going to be something that could be tested in it. I saw what was going to be a wasted opportunity for testing all the online features, and that's exactly what happened. This wasn't really anything amazingly prescient on my behalf. It was a reasonable guess that the network test was going to be a modified version of the original demo, which let you pick a few predefined builds and play in just the Undead Parish. The problem is that none of those builds included any of the 4 miracles that actually create resonance signs, and so that meant they weren't going to be present at all, and that we had no way of knowing if they were going to be working correctly until the game released. I tried to sound the alarm, but my topic was barely noticed. To be fair, it's a pretty obscure mechanic that most PS3 players had gotten used to not existing, so I didn't have high expectations and didn't really expect the community to take an interest, but being invested in uncovering the secrets of this mechanic, it was certainly relevant to me, and the release of Dark Souls Remastered felt kind of like watching a car crash in slow motion, with regards to this particular mechanic, that is. Anyways, in Dark Souls Remastered, I decided to start another run to see what it might take to find a resonance sign. Since it's been a while since I've played it a decent amount, I wanted to make sure my understanding on their unfortunate rarity still matches my general understanding from release. With a brand new character, I went over 15 hours without finding a single one, and within that time frame, I actually managed to run into a Vagrant. So seeing a Vagrant before an actual resonance sign is about as crystal clear as it gets that they are in fact way too rare still. So after being unable to find any on my own, I decided to try and force one into my world, and so I set up a Wrath of the Gods spamming party. I got 4 other players to join me, and I had everyone pick a certain gravestone in the Darkmoon Tomb, and just spam Wrath of the Gods repeatedly. Katarn eventually saw this one on the 3rd grave.
Oh, that's really cool, labeling them by the characters. That's really clever.
Gravestone, which is where I was camping.
Hey, Jay Rizzle, nice to see you again. What the hell was that phantom crab thing? That's a vagrant. Oh, you know, everybody's seen those. Eat those for dinner. That's where Blackguard gets his crab meat from. No, so that's kind of like one of the more obscure mechanics of Dark Souls 1. I don't really remember how vagrants work because I never interacted with one, so it felt like, why waste the brain power learning something about something that I'll never see? Mostly because I play the game offline as well. Oh, silly you, how could you forget? I don't know, man. Maybe you're losing it.
Camping out, so we know it came from me. And Cycling Sage saw one on grave number 2, so we know it came from Sunny. But it took hundreds of casts just for these 2 to come through, and none of the rest of us were having any luck. Eventually we gave up on keeping the set locations, bearing in mind that rings have trouble coming through at the exact same location at the same time, and just ran around the bonfire more freely and spamming even more aggressively. Ultimately, both Cryogenic and myself also got one this way. So 4 out of 5 of us did get to see a resonance sign from this process, but we didn't really learn anything beyond what we already knew. They can sometimes work in Dark Souls Remastered, but it really shouldn't take this kind of effort just to see one, and if you really don't try to make it happen, there's a good chance you're going to go a long, long time without seeing any.
I wonder if that's something about like the connections between the characters, between the games. I wonder if there's like less packets being sent to the servers and the players' games or something like that. Very interesting. Was it worth it?
So, I have a little bit more to say about the underlying mechanics, but here's a question worth bringing up. Is this game really missing anything by not having this mechanic work correctly? It's not remotely vital to enjoying the game, but Dark Souls 1's attempts to include a bunch of weird side mechanics is something I find admirable. The base concept of a sort of communal strength to miracles is a really good one. And though the offensive buffs may have been fairly minor, you know that at some point, somewhere, the extra damage resulted in some victories in PvP, or it helped clutch a last-second win against a boss, and that's pretty damn cool. Matthew Matosis has an excellent video I'd recommend watching called The Lost Soul Arts of Demon Souls. The central point behind it is that Demon Souls was unshackled by expectations. It allowed them to make some bold choices that, although sometimes had a negative baggage, they weren't forced into making something safer. The lack of restraint behind Demon Souls' design is part of its unique identity, something special that gets a little lost as later Souls titles shift towards refining things. I find myself agreeing with most of what he says, but the one little asterisk I feel compelled to add to the conversation is how much Dark Souls 1 really is nestled up alongside Demon Souls in that experimental phase. Sure, a lot of the refinement begins with Dark Souls 1, but they actually went kind of crazier in ways that are worth mentioning. Maybe it was overall safer, in the sense that all of its weird subsystems didn't impact you as directly as World Tendency, or having another player control a boss, or getting de-leveled. But man, Dark Souls 1 really went all in on having a ton more mechanics where they clearly didn't care if the player base understood them. Disasters are gone after the...
It's even funnier to think about they didn't even care about the players when you consider how the original release of Dark Souls 1, they didn't have any way to cure curses until like way later in the game. Like the merchant over in the Undead Burg did not have any purging stones. So you had to figure out how to get to Ingward or something like that.
What now? What's this? What the heck is that? Why did I find rubbish here? Dark Souls 1 might have found a way to mitigate the severity of some risky design elements from Demon Souls, but it shifted in a direction where it doubled down on confusing players with rare side mechanics more deeply than World Tendency ever did. And this is all kind of absent from later games in the series. Don't get me wrong, there are new ideas worth praising, but like, where's all the cool, weird stuff? It's not that Miracle Resonance
Dragon butts
in particular needed to be carried over. But if you'll humor me for a moment, try to imagine what it might look like in a game like Bloodborne. Arcane builds got some criticism for being a bit limited and underwhelming, but just imagine that whenever someone cast a spell, it ripped open a small tear into the cosmos. Instead of a white ring of light, perhaps you could see into space, with stars and galaxies in view. And let's also consider the somewhat underutilized insight mechanic. Perhaps these tears into the cosmos could be hidden behind a certain amount of insight, and your equivalent of reaching higher resonance levels could have been obtained with higher insight. We could spend all...
Yeah, we've heard that there was going to be a cut mechanic of having the Mad Ones spawn pretty much everywhere and patrol a lot more in Bloodborne with the higher insight, but they didn't go with that mechanic for some reason. So you can kind of see a bit of what that might have been like in a place like a Hemlock Charnel Lane.
All day dreaming about adding features to our favorite games, but my point is that this isn't some far-fetched concept by the standards of Dark Souls 1. We would actually expect to find a whole bunch of things just like that in later Souls games if that kind of experimentation hadn't peaked with Dark Souls 1. But of course, this particular mechanic was heavily broken, and Gravelording and Humanity Drop had a bunch of jank to them as well. So the reality is that they probably don't want to incorporate anything in their newer games, unless it's rock solid and its presence in the game is well justified. They were probably unhappy with the execution of some of these mechanics, and as a result they made the decision to back off of them instead of wasting more time on them.
Yeah, I was going to say something to that effect as well, because whatever a developer puts into could arguably be used for another part of the game, unless, of course, there's too much overlapping anyway and somebody just has some free time to work on stuff. But then a person that isn't directly contributing could also be tasked to work on other projects, especially with as much as FromSoft has grown, because obviously they had Elden Ring in the works, they have Night Rain in the works, they have Duskbloods in the works, they had Armored Core. So there's definitely a lot under the hood that's going on that we don't have privied access to.
I can understand that, but I think we are losing something very special with the omission of these kinds of mechanics.
And of course, as these games get bigger and bigger, it probably makes it a little bit harder to sneak in some stuff that's going to be a core feature without it breaking other things, which I know maybe that's not entirely fair. Like it's not uncommon for devs to sneak in things that only they know about. Don't get me wrong, but this seems a little bit more involved, like the whole net play stuff. Do covenants matter and invasion priority? Ooh. So I'm assuming he's coming at this from like a mechanical perspective, but at least for like the player base, I definitely know a ton of the PvPers love covenants. They hate the state of the PvP in Elden Ring and like the lack of incentive to do things, and they definitely wish that covenants existed. As much as I hated the grinds for covenants, a part of me really did enjoy them. I really liked doing the Aldrich stuff and being even the what are they called, the purples, the mound makers, when you can kind of decide to turn your back and harm your own host by your own whims and desires is always a bit fun. You get that whole wild card element.
Lastly, let's try to navigate the supposed role of covenants. Covenants are often believed to be related to Miracle Resonance in some way, but they don't play a role in how they're created or received. Anyone can send or receive them, completely independently of whether or not they're even in a covenant at all. So once again, this is something I think a lot of players are confused about. At best, being in the Princess Guard is required to cast 2 of the 4 miracles that create resonance signs for others, but simply getting a couple miracles behind a covenant doesn't really relate to the rest of the mechanic in a meaningful way. At least, not enough to say it's truly a covenant-based mechanic. So where does this idea come from? Here's an early quote from an IGN article where they had access to a private channel, and they were able to test the online features themselves. I believe this is the only source of information on this. Regarding the Way of White. This covenant is for helping out other players online. Players who are in this covenant will automatically be drawn closer to each other on the network. This makes the above-mentioned Miracle Resonance easier to perform, as well as helps block people from antagonistic covenants from coming closer on the network. So this is also where the idea that being in the Way of White also helps block invasions. So let's switch to talking about that for a moment to help make better sense of what I think they mean. I believe this was partially true for the original version of Dark Souls, and likely isn't true at all for Dark Souls Remastered. What happens when someone tries to invade, at least in the original Dark Souls, is that the game only takes ping into consideration. You have all the normal matchmaking parameters like level ranges, of course, but as long as there's multiple viable targets for an invader, the game doesn't take anything else into consideration besides picking whoever has the best connection with them, the lowest ping, every single time. Let's imagine a private lobby where there's only 3 players. One invader, one host who is without Covenant, and another host who is in the Way of White. If the invader has a better connection with the Way of White host, they'll literally invade them every single time, and that host's Covenant won't do anything to protect them. But that doesn't mean that what IGN said was false. The original version of Dark Souls only ever connects you with up to 20 players at a time. Debug has a display to represent this. If we turn it on, we can see one big circle in the middle, which represents us, and all of these smaller circles surrounding it represent slots for other players we can connect with. Here we can see one active connection I have is just someone running around in their own game at the moment, but they're a potential target for multiplayer, and we're likely passing ghosts, messages, and bloodstains around already. The important question is, how do these slots get filled? They're not all immediately filled upon logging into the game. Instead, they get filled up as you play, with new players getting added in one by one, and sometimes replacing others already in there. The Dark Souls connectivity mod, created by Wolf2K, used its own algorithm for deciding who gets put into a slot and if anyone should be removed. Why keep the slots filled with players who have perhaps moved into a different area of the game, while there's more players hanging out in the same area as you, for example?
That makes a lot of sense. So Chadwick was saying everything was such a mystery back then. Good times. Hatefully difficult, obscure to the point of obtuse, and gloriously unpopular. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I really do like Dark Souls 1. I love the world building. The setting of it just feels so damn oppressive, and that it doesn't give a damn about the player, which is kind of awesome. So you're kind of like clawing your way all the way up to lordship, which is super cool and super thematic. But not going to pretend that it doesn't have its own sets of issues with not telling the player how like stats truly work, the proclivity for players to do the quintessential first game build where you allocate all of your stats fairly evenly distributed, a bunch of different things, so that way you can try everything, which means you're terrible at everything, because I can only speak from experience with that. And just not having a respec and better economization of items and souls do leave a couple things to be desired with that game. And I've honestly been along of the opinion that the Dark Souls games could have improved by having a more robust saving feature, like in pretty much any JRPG at the time, and even like Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past had a better saving system. So I definitely understand why they have some of the features that they do, but for Dark Souls, it doesn't bother me as much, but I feel like Demon Souls and Bloodborne and Sekiro were made a lot worse because you can't always go back and easily get some of those consumables that you're missing, and you have to go back and grind for more, which is just kind of dumb. So, long story short, my experience playing Elden Ring on Steam has only been improved by being able to save my game in multiple slots and then go back and get footage or relook at quest states. And it's just like, if saving was more of a feature, the people that say like, oh, I don't want to save are kind of ruining the experience for me and many other players just because they apparently don't have the intestinal fortitude to not save if they don't want to. So I hate it. That Horn says, unpopular? You don't think DS1 was ever unpopular? I mean, it wasn't exactly popular, like it wasn't mainstream, so Demon Souls is definitely niche. Halo said, what I'm describing with stat allocation is called an anti-build. You always do an anti-build because the game will never be as hard as the first run through. That's probably fair. All right, Faust, thanks for joining us. You have a good night. Take care.
So it's possible that the Dark Souls matchmaking server filtered players in and out in a similar way, and had a priority for connecting players in the Way of White, or possibly all of the co-op covenants. If true, having less slots filled with invaders should reduce your chance for invasions, at least to some degree. Invasions aren't inherently tied to any single covenant. Someone could be in the Way of White and still invade other members with a stockpile of cracked red-eye orbs. But realistically speaking, most invaders are going to be Dark Wraiths, or Forest Hunters, or Dark Moons. So if this multiplayer system was occasionally passing over people from those covenants in favor of other players in the Helper covenants, that should have the emergent result of reducing invasions, without any priority system for the invasion attempts themselves. But the system only applies to the original version of Dark Souls. While we don't know exactly what the server looks like for Dark Souls Remastered, you're ostensibly connected to the entire player base at once. Or at the least, the player base isn't getting divided into smaller batches of just 20 players at a time. So this would mean any supposed networking benefits from Covenants are almost certainly outdated and false. Unless they went out of their way to implement a completely new priority matchmaking system, but there's no evidence of that. So taking this back to Miracle Resonance, should being in the Way of White also benefit that in the original version of Dark Souls? I think the connection here becomes a lot more tenuous than the chance for reduced invasions. It is a covenant that most faith builds will join early on, so it seems like there would be a connection, but Petrus doesn't offer any of the miracles needed to create resonance. Those are all later game miracles, where the player base is more likely to have...
There's a lore reason, guys. It's because Petrus is not a true follower of the Way of White, because he's a jerk.
...moved on from the Way of White. Wrath of the Gods is a popular offensive miracle, and will make it into a lot of players' builds. So that's just something you don't really...
Bro, I've been a scrub this entire time. I had no idea how good this was against these things.
...expect to be paired to any particular covenant. And the Princess Guard was very unpopular for a variety of reasons, so any supposed better pairings on the network probably also didn't help proliferate resonance in a meaningful way there, either. So this is all to say that there was an underlying multiplayer system in the original version of Dark Souls that might have tried to nudge members of certain covenants closer, but the end result on who got to see and benefit from resonance probably didn't get impacted by that very much at all, and again, this probably doesn't exist at all in Dark Souls Remastered. So that just about wraps up everything I have to say about Miracle Resonance. I was planning on doing a follow-up to my Mr. Gimmick episode soon, but I think I'd like to fit in one more Dark Souls Dissected first. So I'll open up another poll on my Patreon for $5 backers and above to help decide the next episode. The choices are the world layout of Dark Souls 3, an Out of Bounds follow-up for Dark Souls 2, and an Out of Bounds follow-up for Dark Souls 1. The poll will close in just 7 days from the time this video is uploaded, so don't delay if you'd like to have some input there. Special thanks again to Drift Item. They helped immensely by not only wrapping up some loose ends of the mechanic that I was unable to solve on my own, but by also helping me record this video. They hacked their game to send resonance signs directly to me. So while what you saw earlier in the video was technically hacked into existence, it's not my own game that was hacked, so everything you saw was still legitimate in terms of being possible. It was all still transferred over the network to me, and my game wasn't modified. While we were at it, I had the idea to set up a scenario you've probably never seen before. Here we have a vagrant surrounded by a ton of resonance signs. I'd also like to thank Eto and Devlin May Die for helping capture current footage of the Darkroot Garden on PlayStation 3, and also Ouroboros, Final Messenger 13, and Godha83 for their footage of the game from back in the day. I'd also like to thank everyone who supports me on Patreon. Your support makes a huge difference.
Yeah, so that was some cool stuff. I definitely did not know that at all, especially with me believing that the Miracle Resonance was more or less the bubble that you saw in the end of Sen's Fortress. So, two different things, apparently. Anyway, Chadwick, you never trusted miracles in your playthrough of Dark Souls. Story reasons always had you wary of them. What a fool. To be fair, like, a lot of the miracles seemed kind of underbaked. If you didn't have access to any truly offensive ones, it just did not feel very, rewarding for me to level up, like, magic very often. And attunement. I always hated leveling up attunement because it felt like a waste of a stat to me. The vagrants use pest threads. And then Paisan, nice to see you again. You wish the quality builds were good in Elden Ring? Sag. So, Okay, folks, I think we'll probably cut it a little bit early tonight. But just as a reminder, for tomorrow's stream, I'm going to check out my video on gold and silver that I did way before the DLC to see like how relevant that still is, or just to kind of talk about some thoughts in the video with like more context, because there's a lot of stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor for that video as well, which may get brought up, may not, I don't remember. And then there was another video, I think it was about like Bloodborne, that I might watch right before going into mine tomorrow. So since we got those requests for me to look at my old stuff, I figured, well, why not do it perhaps with like one of my best / favorite ones that I made. So hopefully you guys will look forward to that one. So until next time, hopefully I will be safe like you guys. I don't know why I'm saying that all wrong. Anyway, that'll be it for me. Take care. Stay safe. Last Protagonist out.